Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose, at Thundergrunt Bob on all relevant social media. And right now, Jamie's going to introduce himself.
I'm Jamie Nash. I am the writer of Save the Cat Writes for TV and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. I'm also a screenwriter. I've done a bunch of stuff. Go check it out on imdb.com. And my handle is Jamie_Nash. It's like I'm sponsored by IMDb.
Okay, Jimmy.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant, and my Twitter handle is at JimmyRGeorge.
Okay, and today we are going to talk about Jamie's pick, the pick that Jamie chose. Jamie chose this. I want to make that clear as Jamie chose it. We're going to talk about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And before we get into it, we're going to talk about our personal feelings and all that. But before we get into everything, I just want to say we're talking about this movie. We're not here to discuss the franchise. We could mention the original three because this is technically a prequel to those as it exists by itself, right? Like that's where it exists chronologically in release. But we're not here to talk about Star Wars. And none of us three are experts on Star Wars. And I think all three of us are not currently even watching Star Wars unless Jamie is still going. I've quit completely. Jimmy, you're not up on that stuff.
I saw the pilot for Mandalorian, and
that means you're not up on that stuff. you're not down. And Jamie, I don't know where you are.
I've watched all the live action TV shows. I've never watched an animated Star Wars anything. I can't get into it for whatever reason.
Regardless, though, we're not Star Wars experts. So if there's we're not here to talk about extended universe stuff. If there's answers to anything that we say here.
You guys didn't read Heir to the Empire.
I mean, but isn't Coruscant from that? I know that much.
Yeah. Right. But we're not here to we're talking about this movie.
Yes.
That's the point of this episode from a script perspective.
From a screenwriting perspective.
I could talk all day about how watching this again, all I could see was the compositing. Like the compositing was nuts to me. You know, like the layers of things now look so different with my eyes in 2024, you know, because I know what to look for now. I was looking at Jar Jar's feet the entire movie, like how they were composited to the ground and how they had shake and wivel and stuff. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about special effects.
I am.
Well, Jamie is.
Yeah.
We're not here, but it's just this movie. That's all I want.
Jar Jar Feet podcast.
The Jar Jar Feet podcast. It's amazing. I mean, the effects they're good for the time, but it's kind of cool seeing them now because back then I thought they were unbelievable, and now you can really see the difference.
The level of design though is stunning.
Design's great. No one's shitting on the design.
Yeah, the design is stunning. It's pretty basic.
So like we always do, before we get into our script discussion topics, we're gonna go around and talk about what this movie means to all of us or did mean at some point. So. Who wants to start? Who wants to?
I think we give it to Jamie because
this was Jamie's pick.
My pick.
Jamie just wanted to do this so bad.
I did. I still like this is an episode I really did want to do. I'm not sure that I wanted to rewatch the movie in some ways. That's where I'll say I'm at with it. So Star Wars is a thing. Let me put this in context. Star Wars is a thing that growing up, my identity was based on Star Wars. Like to the point where still in my life, somebody will say, "Hey, you watching Andor?" And they think I'm the guy that knows all about Andor and everything and all the Clone Wars stuff. And I'm not anymore because of this movie for the most part. In some ways, because of this movie. It started with this movie and then it continued. But up until this point in my life, I could win Star Wars trivia. I could kick anybody's ass. I knew it all. Like I read the books. I read Splinters in a Mind's Eye when I was a kid. I saw the movies dozens of times. I went to conventions. I did whatever. I was the star. It was really tied to my identity to a point in my life. There were other things I loved too, but Star Wars was tied. So I wouldn't, how old was I? Whatever. But I was working. I remember I had a job in Moline. I was a computer programmer, and we had to go to Moline for 2 weeks when Phantom Menace was coming out. And I made everybody on my team go see a midnight show after we had worked an entire week. And I bought tickets in advance, and we all went to see it, and we all showed up. By the way, the trailer for this movie, when I saw it, goosebumps all over. I was just like, I was probably in tears watching it. I was like, oh my God, he's back. Lucas is back. He's finally done it. I went and saw this movie, and you've heard this same story from many people my age, many of us Gen Xers who saw this and grew up with it. And we kind of came out confused. Like, we so wanted to like it, but we so knew something a lot of it was off. Like, it just didn't feel right. Like when we watched it. And it's not that we outright hated it. We went in with such goodwill that we were trying to understand what was wrong with us when we saw this movie. And then I saw it like 5 more times that year. And I started to realize I just didn't like it, and then I saw the sequels to this movie, and I didn't like them even. I liked them even less in some ways. Like, because then I started to not have any expectations. I'd go into them. It was almost like, well, at least Revenge of the Sith was better than Phantom Menace, or I don't know, whatever you'd have to say, or has more of a story. Or I actually, I know this, but just to say, I actually like Phantom Menace more than the others. Because once I saw Phantom Menace, I'd established some new stuff. I saw some cool stuff. There was cool stuff in it. Like, I love the saber battle at the end. And I would say I love the pod race, like, especially on this rewatch. I was like, it's fine. I mean, I like it. It's a good sequence, but it's not blowing me away like some sequences from earlier movies. So anyway, I'll wrap this up with this. When I rewatched it, I kind of had come to the conclusion that Phantom Menace was my 4th favorite Star Wars movie in some ways, or maybe my 5th. Maybe I like Rogue One more or something. I don't know. And especially after I saw Force Awakens and the trilogy played out and stuff like that, I started to go back and like the prequels more because at least they had new stuff. At least it felt like there was a creative mind, misguided as it may be, or messy as it may be, but there was some kind of passion, and it wasn't just a rehash and all that stuff. But when I rewatched it this week, I didn't like it that much. I kind of like when I rewatched when we did Crystal Skull, and I hated Crystal Skull more than this. Like, that one really angered me almost when I watched it. When we went back for this podcast and rewatched Crystal Skull, I actually kind of did like it more. I did, especially after the last indie movie. I was like, there's a lot of fun stuff. There's a good spirit to this movie. It's a mess in a lot of ways that we talked about in that podcast, but I liked it more. I did. I appreciated it a little more. This one, it's not that I hated it more. I was just more apathetic towards it. I was just kind of like, all the bad notes and stuff. I don't know. It's just messy. It's just a messy movie, and it's a little boring. And once you're over some of the new sights that I saw back in 1999 when I first saw it, once you're over that, there's not much left to it. Like, there's no emotional heartstrings. And I think that's the part. There's not a lot of funny stuff. There's not a lot of emotional heartstrings. And outside of the pod race and the end duel, there aren't a lot of like exciting set piece action scenes. So there's really not much left to it. It's like fast forward to the pod race, fast forward to the duel at the end, and skip the rest. And then you're probably pretty good. And that's where I'm at with it.
Cool. Jimmy?
All right, we'll skip all the Star Wars backstory or our life, which you can listen to. We've done this is the 5th Star Wars movie we've done. So I'll just talk about 1999. I was a huge fan, and people who are younger than us don't know the experience of not having YouTube to just like go and like watch a trailer. Like, if you wanted to watch a trailer, you had 3 options. You could tape it off TV, you could go to the movies, or you could go to the pay-per-view channel that was on cable, which just played trailers all day for the movies that you could rent. Right. Which I used to do. I used to tape the trailers off of the TV and I just had like VHS tapes filled with trailers. So anyway, the anticipation culturally for this movie was so insane. I think even having experienced Endgame, that it was even more insane. Like, just everyone everywhere was talking about it and like so excited about it. And I was in college. I was a freshman in college. This was the first trailer I ever downloaded online, and
Jesus.
I'll never forget it. I have told the story before, but I don't think I've told it on this podcast. My suite mates and I at college, we started to download it, and the file was so big that it took like 12 hours to download this like 2-minute trailer. Like, we started the download, and after like 5 minutes and it being on like 0.5%, we just left and went about our day. And 12 hours later, it finally downloaded. And then when we tried to play it, it crashed the computer. Like, the 90s computer could not handle a single 2-minute QuickTime file.
Oh God, the QuickTime files.
So anyway, the other way to see this was I taped this off of the Entertainment Tonight premiere and watched this on the trailer on VHF. I remember when the longer trailer came out, I went to Wing Commander just to watch the trailer. I fucking went to Wing Commander just to watch the trailer. Wing Commander's fine, but
Wing Commander's fine. Yeah,
the number of people that just went to the movies that Friday, just because it was widely known that Phantom Menace, this was the dawn of the movie news era, right? Like, like it was all new. Like, having like advanced like set spoilers and things like that. That was all coming right here at 1999. So we were getting little spoilers here and there. StarWars.com was doing a daily thing where they were like taking pics and like showing snippets. So we had sort of like, you know, images that finally the trailer we had been watching for months and months and months, that finally the trailer gave us some context to. There was just so much anticipation.
The Ain't It Cool News era.
Ain't It Cool News, beginning of Ain't It Cool News.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I totally downloaded that trailer off of an Ain't It Cool News article, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, the movie itself, I like it. Like, when I was younger, I had the exact same response Jamie did, even though Jamie and I are like 9 years apart age-wise. I definitely was bummed out, and then kept going back, rewatching it, being like, what is wrong with me? And finally being like, oh, the movie is not good. But I really enjoy the movie. I love the pod racing. I love the podcast. Of course. I love the pod racing. Love the last act of this movie. I think it's a really good third act, and we're going to talk about it. That being said, I'm going to be super obnoxious and pretentious and rip the shit out of this script for this podcast, because I think that's the purpose, and I think it's going to be really instructive. So I'm definitely going to come across as an asshole. Like, you know, who am I to critique George Lucas? But yeah,
but don't think of it. I mean, that's common at this point.
I mean,
right?
but the script does a lot of things that I see on a day-to-day basis. I'm hitting the bingo card early because I read scripts, amateur scripts, all day from new people who are just starting. And this script does like a lot of the things that I see on a daily basis from people who are like sending me the first script they ever wrote. So it's maddening in that way. So yeah, that's how I feel. There's my
gotcha. Yeah, I think I got two things to say. One is just kind of reiterating what Jimmy was saying in a way. I'm the baby of the three of us, obviously, but I was in high school, and I can only say, like you said, it was a cultural phenomenon that felt like something otherworldly. It can never be replicated again because media can never go back in time, right? Like, it was like we were about to see the second coming of Christ. I mean, it was like
the hype was insane.
You didn't understand, like, you can't understand it, and you never will. Like, no offense to anyone younger than us, but you can't understand. If you were a fan of Star Wars in any capacity, and that was happening, I felt like I was walking into like heaven. It was not, like, just people. My teachers. I went to a religious high school. My teachers were fine with some of us, or our parents said they can leave early. Like, I left high school early the day of release. That's insane to think about. A movie where my parents were fine with letting me leave school and my teachers understood. That's how much it permeated our lives. And I'll say this outright. like I've always talked about the best theater experiences of my life, which would probably be the four Jackass movies and the first Avengers. Best experiences I've ever had. But there's no equal experience to like the pre-movie build up ever. Being in the theater, being there with my friends, being at the Senator in Baltimore, which is like my favorite movie theater ever. Everyone was just every seat in the house was filled. Everyone was glowing. It was a feeling that made me fall in love with movies for the rest of my life. Like, even if the movie didn't live up to that expectation, it's like, whatever this is the best feeling I've ever had. Okay. And yeah, I had sex by that point, but but that was it was just like everyone was glowing. It was just amazing. We all felt like we were about to witness something so important and special, you know? And the second thing I wanted to say is just, I think that there's no movie that signifies movies for me and how we change and they don't. Because over the course of the life of this movie, I have gone back and forth. I loved it when I first saw it, and then I immediately hated it. And then I loved it again, then I hated it for like 20 years. And then Disney bought Star Wars and started doing its thing. And all of a sudden, the Clone Wars cartoon made me sort of appreciate them again. And then all of a sudden, I hated the sequel trilogy so vehemently. I was like, well, wait a minute. I prefer new ideas that are executed terribly to bad ideas or repetitive ideas that are executed beautifully. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I have changed as a person so much in the how many years has it been? In the decades
25.
Since this came out. 25 years since this came out. I have changed as a person so much, and this movie signifies it better maybe than any movie in my life, where I've like hated it, despised it, absolutely loved it, hated it again. Then I sort of made my peace with it, and now I just enjoy it. Like it's so I guess if anything I wanted to say is, for me, it's just the signal of rewatch movies, because you change. And if you watched a movie 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and you hated it, don't start talking about it again like you know the movie anymore, because you don't. You got to revisit movies where you are. They're never going to change. You do. You got to meet them again to know what your review is. And I think the Phantom Menace is like that for me. It really is. Like I still enjoy this movie too. I think I enjoyed watching it now. I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia, Jimmy. I think me and you might have that more than Jamie does, considering it's his pick. But there's something I think I also have a better, more mature taste now. I spent years watching. I broadened my horizons past Lucasfilm and Steven Spielberg in the old days. Like I've spent years watching schlock, foreign films, art films, everything now. So I have a broadened taste, and there's something I find endearing about all the stilted acting and the weirdest fuck stuff he's doing in these movies now. The Phantom Menace is an objectively odd movie. It's a weird movie, and it looks fucking weird, and everyone's talking like they're not like it wasn't made on Earth. It's an odd movie. And I can appreciate that now because I have taste for schlock, and I have taste. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I have taste beyond what I did back in 1999. Back in 1999, I thought if a movie is like Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's good. Back to the Future, it's good. It has to be that, and there's nothing else. Now I don't feel that way anymore. I'm much more broadened with my taste, and we're obviously gonna tear the ass out of this thing. But that won't affect even the slightest of my enjoyment of it. Even remotely. It won't even move the needle. You know what I mean? So that's it. The pod race is pretty fucking cool. Jamie's wrong. Your sound system must suck.
I saw it. I went to the movies, by the way, yesterday to see this.
Oh, you went to the movies?
I saw it on the big screen. Yeah.
Hey, I went to see The Fall Guy this weekend, and there were cosplayers there to see this movie on the big screen. And they had to be like 20 years old.
Wow.
So that kind of made me feel like, as much as my heart is dead inside for the Star Wars brand, seeing that kind of made me be like, that's nice. It made me like, well,
good for them.
There was a time where I believed, and now they're still there, and good for them.
They still feel joy.
Yeah, they were with their friends. They were all like dressed up with their friends. I was like, all right, good, man.
I
Some of
love
them
it.
had Harry Potter costumes by accident.
Yeah, right.
So
Some Dune costumes.
there was one thing I forgot about in 1999. I was a computer programmer. It was the early days of my screenwriting career. Like I was just starting to try screenwriting when this movie came out, I think. And I remember because I had money, I had disposable income. I went to the toy store and bought before the movie came out, bought every single Phantom Menace toy because I couldn't have those as a kid because I didn't have money.
Right.
I bought every one of them, right? Every single one of them. And in my head, I was like, this will be an investment, right?
Yeah.
So 2 years ago when I was selling like my Ninja Turtles comic and all that stuff, I still have it, by the way, if anybody wants it. One of the things I did was I finally sold those. So I put them online and I was like, all of them for $60 or whatever. I spent like $200 on them all. And I was like, have them all for $60. They sat there for a year. Nobody wanted them. I dropped it to like $30. I dropped it to like $20. I think I sold them for I sold like my $200+ worth of Star Wars Phantom Menace toys for like $25 or something like that to someone.
Jamie, I did the same thing. I still have my entire episode 1 collection. I even have VHS tapes still wrapped. I like bought them. I'm not going to touch them. I don't care. I don't need to make like $30. You know what I mean?
I just was cleaning. I was cleaning out the house, and I just didn't feel like.
No. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, maybe if I wait another decade,
I
there'll
have
be some resurgence.
I have stuff around my house like that. I got to the point where I'm like, I haven't even looked at this stuff in 20 years. And my philosophy is, if I take a picture of it and get it, I'm okay with getting it. It feels better to me. So I just take a picture of it and then I sell it or throw it out or give it away. And I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, I remember that. Here's the picture. That's more than I ever.
I need the brain data.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
I feel like this question's really funny, but who wrote this shit?
Well, George Lucas wrote this shit, and I think it was his first sole credited Star Wars movie. Am I right about that? Because the Hayeks or whatever their names are, Alan and whatever, they wrote the original.
Willard, I think.
Willard. Is that what's their name?
I'm pretty sure.
What's their names? I can't even remember.
One of them directed couple. Howard the Duck. That's what.
Yeah, they were the couple, right? The husband and wife team. And so even they did the original Star Wars. They did a pass, and then of course Kasdan for the second and the original. I can't think of her name either. I didn't look up the past movies.
Lee Brackett.
Yeah, Lee Brackett. That's what I was thinking of.
Well, according to IMDb, Lucas is the sole writer on A New Hope.
Oh, really? I don't know why.
But IMDb can be edited, and they've changed so many things over the years.
Yeah. I know they wrote on it, but maybe they didn't get credit. I don't know. I thought they did for some reason. But so he gets sole credit for this. Again, not something I researched for this or cared too much. But I remember over the years hearing people say they took a pass at Phantom Menace. They did work on Phantom Menace, because he had a lot of hangers on and people like that, and people that ultimately went on to work for Lucasfilm throughout the Clone Years period. And for some reason, I think there might be some ghostwriters that maybe dabbled in it a little bit, like they did a little pass.
I do know I remember the story about him asking Lawrence Kasdan.
I've heard of that.
Kasdan said, no, it should be yours completely.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then he saw the movie and he was like, that was something,
Yeah.
like he might have regretted not helping him or something like that. I don't know.
Right. And I'm sure George just wanted him to do like a dialogue pass, which is what it needed. He probably.
I don't think George Lucas cares about dialogue at all.
But that's what I mean. I think he knows a little bit, but knows that Kasdan can come and punch that stuff up. He's like, he doesn't really do that, because that's kind of what he did on Empire. He made Yoda better. He made the love story better. He made Han Solo better. And that's the kind of stuff he does well, is just kind of comes in and does a pass without reinventing the structure or anything like that. Like, he doesn't do a structured version, Kasdan, on these movies. He more does dialogue and character punch, which I think if you did that to this movie, it could help it greatly, which we'll talk about. So anyway, it's George. The box office, just before we get kicked off, $1 billion worldwide. Well, I mean, $1 billion 43, 283, whatever. But 1 billion. If
Is
you
that
round it.
that's from 99?
This is Box Office Mojo. I don't know
It's
if
been released several times though. So
it has the releases. Like, I don't know if, because just this week it made like $9 million.
Yeah, I
or
bought a
something, 10 million.
ticket.
Yeah.
very
This has different releases like in the bottom. So I think it rolls it up.
mhm.
Like, I don't think it just does 99.
I know at the time it was only second to Titanic when it came out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this was a big year, me and my list in 99, but just to give you a feel, this is domestic. So it has 430 million domestic
in 99
in 99.
Yeah.
The Sixth Sense was number 2 with 276. Probably a movie we should one day do on the podcast.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Powers, Spy That Shagged Me, 206 million. That's number 3. Toy Story 2, The Matrix, Tarzan, Big Daddy, The Mummy, Runaway Bride, Blair Witch Project, Notting Hill.
Take me back.
Take
me back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a book written about 99.
And the variety.
There's also other
In
movies
that
you didn't
list.
mention, like Big Lebowski and shit like that.
Yeah, the
well, that's
ones that-
98. That might be 98.
Well, there's ones further down on this list, like Shakespeare in Love and, stuff like that are
That
big,
one Best Picture.
American Beauty, things like that are pretty big movies for their times, but they're further down on the list.
Was it Fight Club 99?
I think it was.
Yep.
It was. I don't see it on this list, but I remember.
I don't think the box office for Fight Club would register top 10. But
yeah. I don't know where it falls. I'm staring at the list, but I think it was 99. So the only other thing I wanted to mention about the Who wrote this shit, there was an earlier draft that a lot of people discuss online. I don't know if you guys kind of looked up any of that.
I did not.
Okay. So the earlier draft, I'll talk about it a little bit as we go through, because the earlier draft actually fixes some of the issues you may have. It was, a lot of people think the earlier draft was better, and they kind of messed around with it. I'll give you a couple of the big things. And then as I remember them when we talk, we'll go through. The biggest one is that Qui-Gon is really not in it. It's Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan is Qui-Gon's role. And there really isn't a second person. They come back to Qui-Gon later on when they go to the council. He's there and he's Obi-Wan's master. But Obi-Wan's kind of a full-fledged Jedi, and he's kind of his own man. He's a little older. And he kind of is the one bringing the action through the story. But then they inserted, Liam Neeson's character later on in a second draft.
But also not having Liam Neeson, that would be a terrible thing for this movie.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean? Like the choice of
he's the best like performer in the movie, I think,
by far.
By far.
Yeah,
and he's the only one that, I don't know, he's bringing something to the wooden dialogue and the sincere. He brings something to it. But it's weird that Obi-Wan is just kind of marginalized.
He's barely. He's given nothing to do.
Right. So
kill Darth Maul. That's it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I think Ewan McGregor wouldn't. He might have been much better had he had the other role.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some other, like, I don't know that these are Stranger Things, but Anakin's a little older in it. There's kind of a love triangle going on between Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin that looked like it was going to go on for the future.
So they put that in that one. Okay. They started that here.
The roots of it began, I think. I think the roots of it began. There was a lot more politics stuff. More politics.
More.
And everybody says Jar Jar was much better. They said he spoke English. He was more of a serious character. He was less of a joke.
Like the gray Gungan that like is always kind of yelling at him.
Yeah.
I always was like, there had to be a draft where that was the Jar Jar character and he wasn't comedic relief,
Mm-hmm.
He was just like a more serious Gungan. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I always read to me like they were like, no, we need something here for laughs. And we're going to change it.
And while that draft is not available, I think there was some kind of CD that came out, like it was the Phantom Menace annotated draft. And the reason people know about this draft is because that annotates with the differences from the original draft or something like that.
Oh man, I brought this annotated screenplay of all of the old ones. If there's a prequel one, I gotta get that, man. Holy
It was
shit.
weird. It sounded like it was on a CD or something, like from what
Okay.
I've read. I don't quite understand.
I'm going to eBay.
Yeah, it's out there though. I mean, you could find a million articles.
It's not in Jamie's garage though.
No,
Yeah,
I did not pick that
He took
up.
a picture of it.
That's when I gave up. Had I liked the movie, maybe more than I would have. But anyway, that's the Who Wrote This Shit part.
Awesome. Well, let's start it out with how the movies start out, right? Let's talk about the crawl. This is yours, Jimmy. What did you want to do with this?
I put this on here because, and I think we've got too much to go into overall to really go into that Eric Bork book that I wanted to talk about. But I think a lot of scripts, you can tell that they're not going to be like emotionally engaging just from the core idea, right? And it's like you can diagnose problems at the idea stage, and a lot of people just want to put their butt in the seat and write. And hey, I applaud that. I love there's immense value in just the flow and just going with the flow and writing when you feel like the story has to come out of you. But I think the comparison of these crawls is a great example of how maybe the idea wasn't workshopped enough to have the built-in structure for a good story. So I just wanted to compare the two crawls.
Well, you just said maybe the idea wasn't workshopped enough. Let me just say, the idea wasn't workshopped enough. You don't need to say maybe. As I said to you guys earlier in the chat, this is a movie written by a middle-aged man for kids who doesn't understand children's media. And he was surrounded by yes men. That's why it's this. That's why it's this insane thing we're going to talk about.
No one even did anyone even just look at the crawl and be
no.
This is not. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to frame it like that because no one was telling George Lucas in 1998 or whatever. No, if he said it is, you just go yes, sir, because as far we were concerned, like we talked at the beginning, this was the second coming. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was no one saying no to him. Anyway,
a couple things to that point though. One is a lot of people say, and I tried reading the Star Wars. They turned it into a graphic novel a few years back that adapted his original draft. And it's kind of boring like this. It's a lot of politics and royalty and just lots of, it needs a Han Solo. I always say that's my biggest problem with this movie. It needed a Han Solo to get me through it, to make fun of it. Like it needed somebody like
the coolest person is Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon's not exactly having fun.
Obi-Wan probably could have been that character in some ways.
But he's not.
He's not.
He's kind of a dork in this movie.
He's like the only guy that has a joke in the movie, though.
Yeah.
Besides Jar Jar, but it's out of place when he has
the negotiations were short.
Yeah, exactly. Like he does bust jokes, but they're just not. It's like, I'm not sure.
It needs a Star Lord or some shit.
It needs somebody like that. Yeah. And the Phantom Menace did as well. But when he says, and it, I'm sure the biggest thing that when George is like, I made it for kids, and really what he's saying was, stop picking on my movie. He's basically saying it's a dumb movie, and I hate when people say that. It's a movie. Who cares?
Outside of that, Jamie, what I was saying is like, there's no target audience for the Phantom Menace. You know what I mean? Well, you have Jar Jar and that much political discussion in one movie is so fucking weird.
So
it's so weird.
So I'll sort of bust on George and defend the movie at the same time. That philosophy I almost wanted to put this on the talking points because it's so relevant to this movie.
Yeah.
But when Star Wars came out, because he basically said, when I made Star Wars, it was for kids, but a bunch of dumb adults like it, so I don't care. And it's like, but when I was a kid, so what was the big kids movie that came out 2 months before this movie or whatever that we talked? Star Wars, the original. It was Bad News Bears. Okay, and as we talked about with Bad News Bears, there's movies, kids movies. Some of them, like the ones I watched, tended to be written for adults. They just were. It was just the way it was. You might put a kid in it. You might do. I think in general, a movie like Star Wars was a kids movie. because people like my dad liked Star Wars just fine, were like, it was almost embarrassing for them to like science fiction or comic books or something like that in the 70s. So anything that was beneath them, that wasn't sophisticated or something, or John Wayne Western, was a kid's movie. Even John Wayne Western might have been a kid's movie. It was different back then when you said it's a kid's movie, because kids' movies were like kind of serious and dark and adult-like. They were different.
Also, the term kids is very malleable. Like Jar Jar is like something for like, preschoolers.
Yeah.
Whereas kids doesn't necessarily mean preschoolers. It could mean anything from teenagers down. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, Jar Jar worked for a lot of kids. He did. It just, what age were they is the question. Okay. Back to the crawls.
Back to the
crawls. So you want me to read these?
Yeah, let's read the first one and talk about it. And read the second one.
This is the first one for Star Wars: A New Hope. Okay, I'm going to read that. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Pursued by the Emperor's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy.
I mean,
okay?
Yeah,
we should have threw in the opening crawl to Spaceballs in this one too. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
it's got some great stuff in there.
I think it speaks to, and I didn't put this on the thing, but I'm realizing, looking at this now, it speaks to workshopping that why here, why now? Like, why does this story have to happen here at this place? And why does this story have to happen now at this specific time? And figuring out those two, answering both of those questions and making sure that those are as specific and ripe for drama as possible.
It also tells us what to fear, what to be scared. The Death Star.
We've got the obstacles right there. Yeah,
the Empire and the Death Star are bad. Princess Leia is our protagonist, right?
We've got the story DNA sort of already set into place right there, and because of that, why here, why now? There's this built-in urgency. Like, it's just even in the backstory, ready to rock.
It kind of, it's not this, but it's the thing I always talk about, that story before the story.
Yeah.
We're joining in the middle of a story. And, you could write the same crawl for Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep.
After finding the such and such, he ventures into the cursed land of blah, 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 and search for the temple. But are his compadres allies or against him?
That is so great, Jamie. Yeah. Maybe there's a great exercise in here with, like, what's your crawl?
Even if you're writing like Wayne's World, write the crawl.
Yeah,
what's your crawl?
Yeah, because it forces you to like be in the middle of it. Like it makes your audience lean forward if you're already in the middle of that story.
These have been parodied so much too. I almost want to go back and read every comedy parody of the Star Wars crawl. Revenge of the Nerds, Spaceballs, Star Wars, Austin Powers 2 had one. I bet they all do maybe a better job of this next one. I bet you. Like, if you went to look at the parody ones, I bet you they read
them.
I bet you. I'm not even joking.
Story DNA.
They might actually have better story DNA than this one.
I want you to read this next one, because I do have a comment that I felt after I read the crawl when I watched this week.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace. Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. I'm trying to read it with the same respect as I did the other one. To outlying star system is in dispute. Hoping to resolve the matter with a blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, to settle the conflict.
All right, Jamie, what were you going to say?
Okay, so I read this, and then it does the thing where it goes off into that music. Like it's kind of this, what's going to happen? But it's like they sent two people to have a talk. And it's like, and then it's like this dramatic music afterward. It's like, why, and it almost underscores how off the crawl, the whole thing is.
So why here, why now?
It's like the music doesn't work for it. The music that always works. It doesn't work for this.
For sci-fi pulp, having the phrase "the taxation of trade routes"
to outline star systems is in dispute. So the big conflict is the trade route taxation.
That sentence is like written by an accountant.
It's the Lucasfilm accounting department.
Yeah, it's like just somebody that's
like,
never
George,
had.
You need to fix that first sentence.
I don't mean to laugh so much. I'm sorry. I love the movie, so it's not like...
yeah. Okay, so hoping to resolve the matter. So the why here, why now is bringing us into a situation that on the surface is just like negotiating trade disputes.
Let's send our best
negotiators. Salesmen, yeah. It basically puts the Jedi in as like, the
only weird part about it is he secretly sent his best. It's like, why secret? Who cares?
Secret?
It's not. It's a trade federation. It's like, no, there's a blockade and stuff like that. So
the blockade, but the difference here, as I kind of spoke to you a little bit, Jimmy, about it too, is like, if you look at the New Hope one, like a battle has already taken place, and a victory has already happened, and everything. The story before the story is there.
There's already escalated tension.
We're like at the beginning of a possible Cold War situation that's going to be a meandering kind of, just like real politics. It's like you kind of don't know what's going to happen when you have a Cold War and stuff. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's the beginning of our story. We're meeting them here where it just started.
Now,
like, they just started blocking stuff.
If they push that why here, why now a little further in the overall storyline, and we met up with, like you said, the first draft, the earlier draft, Jamie, with like a teenage Anakin, you basically push that Attack of the Clones stuff forward to here, and that's where we're coming in for the first time. It changes, like everything's sort of everything's more in motion. There's higher tensions. There's lots of drama built in.
I mean, or just come in that the like droid army has already started attacking.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Or something. I don't know.
Blood has been shed.
Right.
I think there's great. Yeah, which we're gonna get into in a little while too. Yeah. I think there's great lessons to be learned about like workshopping. I love, Jamie, that idea that you put out there. Like, what is your crawl before the movie starts? Like, are you putting us into the middle of a situation, whether it's a drama or, like you said, Wayne's World comedy? Are you like thrusting us into the middle of your characters' lives at a specific time that is just like so ripe for change?
Yeah. Even in a drama, like let's say it's something like, what was the movie I watched the other night? The Idea of You with Anne Hathaway. Okay. You could put a crawl in front of it like, divorce. She has spent years alone and now she's suffering by herself, and you could do it in this kind of bombastic terms, just so that when you fade in and it's a breakfast scene, suddenly the breakfast scene
matters, right?
Yeah, it matters.
Yeah.
And we're not saying put this in the movie.
No, but you need to know it.
It's the momentum you can start your movie with.
Yes.
And if you don't have that, it's kind of like you're kind of starting with a dud.
I don't want to like put this under too much of a microscope, but also I'm thinking that while the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, just cut that out. Well, like that doesn't, to me, that kind of doesn't, right? It doesn't.
I was going to say, I think we could get Lawrence Kasdan to write a punch up of this.
Yeah,
you could say, choking off the starving people of, and stuff like that. There are ways you can punch this up to make it sound more exciting. But then you have to
actually make those changes
in the movie,
tangible in the story. Yeah, I'm not talking about the actual words and prose. I'm talking about the construction.
This is the Rosetta Stone of what's wrong.
Yes,
forward.
that's
It really
the
is.
thesis of everything we're gonna say
Yeah,
from
pretty
here
much.
on in.
Why don't we just end it there?
Yeah.
Just read the fucking crawl. Like it doesn't really talk about the people. It doesn't say, you know what I mean? It doesn't say like the people are suffering on Naboo. It's just happening on Naboo and stuff. But I don't know, just telling us that somebody is endlessly debating in the opening of the movie is such there's a bunch of people arguing. So, like, you know what I mean?
Imagine being somebody like now walking into a pitch meeting and they're like, we're making a Star Wars sequel. What do you got? Here's what I got. There's this tax federation. They're blockading a planet. And get this, the chancellor sends his 2 leading negotiators to talk it out. Fade in. You know, I mean,
it's not
what?
constructed in a way that's going to lead to an emotionally engaging story. So, yeah. And on that note,
yeah, right. Let's talk story DNA, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, Jamie,
Yeah,
do you want to set this up and we can kind of just talk it over?
Sure thing. So story DNA, it's a save the cat term, but you'll find it in other places. He just uses the term story DNA, but you'll find these principles pretty much anywhere where you talk about log lines. But story DNA, the idea that Blake Snyder had in Save the Cat was you come up with these things first before you come up with anything else in your story. You have to have these things locked down.
To my point about the crawl.
Yes. And the 4 things are when you're coming up with your story, who is the hero of the story? What is that hero's compelling goal they're trying to reach throughout the story, especially through Act 2? What's the obstacle standing in the way of them achieving that goal? And if they don't achieve that goal, what's the horrible thing that happens? Or vice versa, what's the big reward that they're not getting or something like that? And those two connected. That's story DNA. So just super quick, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, trying to achieve the Lost Ark. Nazis are in the way. That's the obstacle, or the mystery of where to find it is in the way. That's also an obstacle. And the stakes are, if the Nazis get it, they will, take over the world when World War II hasn't started yet. But, they'll do horrible things with it. They'll have that power. That's story DNA in simplicity. Star Wars, you could probably do the same thing with like Luke Skywalker and friends must take the droids to Alderaan, or get the droids. It's really the droids to the rebels. Get the Death Star plans to the rebels. The bad guys are in the way. If they don't get the plans, the fate of the galaxy is in jeopardy from the Empire's new weapon. That's kind of the story. And with that, let's talk about Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So good. Let's just go down the line, really, right?
Yeah, like
so,
who's the protagonist?
Who's the protagonist of this?
Good question. And we're not the first people to ask this question. This is a popular question.
Watching it now and talking about it way too much, like we shouldn't have in the chat, Jimmy. I was like, part of me was like, maybe Palpatine's the fucking protagonist of this movie. There's a part of me that's like, maybe that is the approach there.
This is a movie that gets goofy answers like that because nobody knows. Like they'll be like, Jar Jar is the and it's like, yeah, and they'll make a case for it because the case for anybody. So let's go down the likely suspects. First of all, the most likely suspect, in my opinion, is Qui-Gon, right? He's kind of the guy you start with. He's the guy you finish with. He's kind of doing all the talking. He's kind of making most of the moves.
Even outside of the script, because of the performance, he's the active
participant. He's the one.
He's the focus.
Yeah.
If you I don't know. I don't remember the poster, but my guess is his head is square on the poster or something, or he's there.
I don't know.
I can't remember what his poster looks like, but he feels like the right guy. Now, when I'm usually determining heroes, there's a couple things I'm asking, and one of the big things is who has the arc. Who has the character?
His head is the biggest on the original poster. So.
Yeah. I mean, he feels like the star. This feels like Liam Neeson's movie.
He also was the name actor. Mm-hmm. There was a reason.
And if you look at it, like if I thought about it, okay, hero, Qui-Gon, what would his goal be?
To train
Well,
the chosen one, or
No,
see, I think that gets to like the B story, the side
that's B story. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's to save what's the word? He knows that the Federation is attacking, and he is trying to either head off or protect Naboo from the attackers. Is that something like that?
something like that. No, that
Yeah.
I took a line that's for this from the movie, like an hour in. He says to Anakin, "We're headed to Coruscant on a very important mission." And at that point, I still was scratching my head. What is that mission?
Right.
Well,
What is it?
Yeah, he's going back there to do something.
They're
Maybe
taking the Queen to Coruscant, something to do
I mean,
with the argument over the trade.
The problem
Yeah.
you guys are having is that his goal in the movie is sort of just protect the Queen and do whatever is right in the moment. That's the problem, is right. Like
the photo finish is vague.
It's vague. There's no thing.
There is kind of a thing where, his ordinary world is he's going to a negotiation. The catalyst is, oh no, they've been attacked. They're attacking. That's the thing. It feels like a catalyst. And then he kind of reacts based on that. But his plan is a little bit like, what is his specific goal? Is it because at first it's like to help get her off the planet, and then they go to the place, and then they come back to the place. It
keeps changing.
Yeah, and then they do a whole side trip with Anakin. It's
whole
nother.
I mean, for a while, it's just to get apart.
It's to get apart.
Ship.
Yeah,
that's his goal.
15 minutes of the movie pauses to get apart.
And if we looked at it through,
I'm serious.
That's so funny when you say it out loud.
Yeah, I did that on purpose.
Yeah, it's very funny.
And George is if I tried to figure out what George was doing here, Big George, I think he thinks he's doing the same thing he did in Star Wars: A New Hope, where kind of the two Jedis are the droids, I kind of think, and they kind of get a little lost, but then we meet our main characters, and then we go on side trips like Save the Princess. You know what I mean? Like that's a side trip. Like let's hang out with Anakin, and then we get back to the main story. But it's not as clean as that movie. It's a lot of characters with a lot of different agendas.
He's trying to put all the Star Wars pieces in play.
So here are the other people that people commonly say. So no, it's not Qui-Gon. This is the reason you're having a problem. It's Obi-Wan, but it's definitely not Obi-Wan, right?
No,
barely.
Yeah,
he's barely engaged.
So people raise their hands and say it's Obi-Wan. The one that's good, and people will say Anakin just because it feels like it should be Anakin because he's a kid. He's kind of got the Luke Skywalker.
It's the beginning of his story.
It's the beginning. He becomes a space pilot by the end. It feels like, but he's barely involved in large portions of the movie, like the opening, and
Also, once again, he's just going along with.
He kind of goes along.
Yeah, he's not. He doesn't have a goal he's working.
He's not like Luke, who kind of has this passion to fight for the Rebel Alliance and stuff like that, and realizes it.
I mean, he got freed from being a slave. He's gonna go.
He's gonna go.
Right? I didn't put the choice part out there, but that was like it was an easy choice. I mean, he has to leave his mom, so it's not an easy choice.
Yeah, it
should have been a much harder choice. That's another issue. Yeah. Like, okay, yippee, and then like he's walking out. I don't want to leave. Just go. Mommy. Okay, yippee. It's like he says yippee far too many times. Kasdan would have definitely cut out all the yippies in the story.
Poor Jake Lloyd.
So yeah, Anakin, and honestly, with Jake Lloyd, and we'll talk about that when we get to the dialogue.
Okay.
So that anyway, he's another one that people point to. They say obviously it's Anakin's movie, and I get why they say that because it feels like a Luke Skywalker hero's journey, but it just isn't. It's not quite there. It's not there. It's not there. So here's one I think is compelling just because I never really investigate it. But a lot of people say it's Padme, it's her movie. And she's the one. And I kind of see that in some ways more than Anakin. But again, she's just not pushed forward enough. She's not in it as much as Liam Neeson but I can kind of see where she kind of has an arc. She starts as one thing.
She starts as a queen and ends as a warrior, sort of.
And she's not afraid to show her, she stops relying on the decoys and puts her.
Exactly.
her face forward and say
she's
the one.
not the Phantom Menace. You know,
Yeah.
she is front and center, where the Phantom Menace is still hiding behind things. And I honestly think that's, if you wanted to do kind of like a hot take version of this, and really, who's your protagonist shouldn't be a hot take, right? It
No.
should be, the hot take is it's Jar Jar or something.
Yeah, I
You know,
put it on the list to sort of inform all the other stuff once again.
No, my hot
Absolutely.
take was it's Darth Sidious.
I think that if you just tweaked it ever so slightly here and there to do that, it would work so well. Like, wow. That version of it. Yeah.
To what?
Sidious, make it Palpatine's the protagonist, because he wins
You mean-
in the end,
you
but
mean-
it definitely doesn't feel like it based on the way it's constructed.
You mean do like an Infinity War, basically?
Yeah, like
Right,
basically, yeah.
It's like make it his
it's a
movie.
Thanos movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
like,
Thanos movie.
If you
So
start with him like sitting there, and then you show him like go to the back hallway and put the hood over his head, and, like,
Right.
start the
that's
hologram, and then he takes it off, and he's like,
we talked
you know,
about
like-
this. Is the problem with the movie is it's acting in the context of the franchise. It's acting like that reveal that Palpatine and Sidious are the same person was some kind of reveal.
yeah,
so weird.
It's terribly executed. We
so
all
weird.
already knew that shit.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's like,
playing
why-
it like it's a mystery whether it's two people or not.
It's like, George, why aren't you showing us the behind the scenes of
Yes.
Darth Sidious planning all this?
all you need to do is put the hood on and start the projection. Like that's
Yeah, like-
literally all you had to do, and be like, oh yeah,
And there's another version of this movie where we don't know who Palpatine is, where they cast a different actor. He's younger
Yep.
or something,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
he's in disguise,
yeah.
and it is really a mystery, and we don't know. Is it
But
Padme?
because-
Is it
yeah.
Qui-Gon? Is it Yoda? Is it whoever? I don't know.
It
But
muddies up an already confusing
yeah, it's weird.
villain's plan.
So just to kind of
Who's
kind of
doing
put it-
what?
put a close on the hero, and the other big question is, and you really need to know the hero to know the goal, but what is the goal of, like, if we just look at it from like what's the group's goal in this movie?
Well, they don't know about Darth Sidious,
I know.
so their goal is just to stop what's happening on Naboo, right? Like,
yeah, it is.
That's
It's
it.
to-
It's-
it's to stop the invasion or save lives.
But
from
what
this
what is happening
invasion.
on Naboo, which is on my later topics, is so confusing.
It is. It is.
I don't even
got
know.
every-
I've
to
watched
every-
this movie 30 times. I don't
Yes.
even know what's happening on Naboo.
Do you understand, everyone listening, that we talked me and Jimmy broke the rule and we talked way too much in our chat about it, and like I even told Jimmy something that he didn't know before, and I was like, and even I'm confused by the thing I told him.
We'll
So,
save it for a couple
I will
topics.
say
from
it,
now.
but I'm just saying you need to understand that we tried to suss it out before this, and we still aren't
I'm
there.
still confused. What is happening on Naboo?
Well, there are. So
Oh man,
there are invasion forces on Naboo.
yes, there are.
Are
Yeah,
they?
but
But it's like the beginning of an invasion. Number
Right.
one, they have no food, medicine, supplies are not being taken there, so that's already suffering of some sort.
They're suffering, even though it's not shown.
Right, and the Trade Federation, the Viceroy, during the course of the movie, starts imprisoning people from Naboo off camera.
yeah,
That's
I'm gonna save it for a couple minutes from now. I'm gonna table that.
I can't stop
Okay.
laughing. I'm sorry. It's so funny to think about. It happens off camera is really funny.
Yeah.
Oh man. Anyway, where
Yeah.
were we with the DNA?
But I think that's really it.
Yeah.
We can't figure out who the hero is. We can't figure out what the goal really is.
Yeah,
That's-
and the
it's
stakes
something to
are
do with
off
saving
screen.
Naboo.
Well, the obstacles
And-
are Darth Maul and Darth Sidious.
But
Well-
they don't know that.
Yeah, you can only really know your obstacle if you know your goal. Because if you think the goal is to convert Anakin Skywalker to a Jedi, then there's different obstacles. Then it's Yoda.
Right.
So it gets confusing. But yeah, I think in general you're right. Between the Trade Federation and
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul and Sidious, Naboo is in trouble. It's going to go down, and they have to.
They
they're
can't
not,
get their Amazon packages.
Yeah. it's a little bit. Blake Snyder has a term for like low urgency stakes. And this
Yes.
one I think fits. It's called Watch Out for That Glacier.
Yes.
And this
Yes,
feels a little
I
bit like
use
Watch
that
Out
all
for
the
Your
time.
Glacier.
Yeah, because the glacier is like right in front of the people.
It's
and then
the
cut
Austin
back
Powers
a half an hour. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
The guy
On
screaming because he's gonna get run over by
on a
slow
high
moving
level
steamroller.
story.
And it really shows when they go and meet Anakin, because it just feels like, let's go to dinner. Like, instead of let's steal a part because we got to get out of here
We
and
gotta
save a
get
whole
outta here.
planet.
Nope,
You know, we can't have a pod race and trust a
What's
kid.
even funnier is they keep saying when they check in with Obi-Wan, we're running out of time.
Right.
But then they just go to a pod race.
That's
and-
okay. We'll wait a day and watch the pod race, and
We're
hopefully
running out
that'll
of
work out.
time.
It's like, what?
I was gonna say that my whole hot take about Darth Sidious being the protagonist, at least his goal is way more clear in all respects than the other protagonists you mentioned, Jamie. You know what I mean? Like, at least his goal can be said out loud, right? He wants to become the Supreme Chancellor. That's
Right.
But even that, in my opinion, is difficult to track. Like, I don't
It
know
is,
what
but
the
I think
fuck
it's
is
easier to
going
say.
on.
Because there's no urgency. Like, he can do a million. If this fails, he can do another thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
next
the
week
urgency
and
is
so-
terrible with
Yeah.
everything.
Accelerate our plans.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes for a tricky thing. But anyway, that's the story DNA,
That informs everything else.
yeah, which I mean, it's been debated. The heroes thing, especially, has been debated forever, and that's why if you're in a position where you're getting hot takes on who your hero is, you're in trouble. That's trouble.
What's the deadline to achieve the goal? Just before everybody dies? Like,
in our lifetime?
yeah,
Yeah.
sometime in the next.
I mean, basically before everybody starves to death, but since we don't show it, like, from not having supplies, but like, since we don't show that,
Right.
it's like, and that could be a few weeks.
Well, it doesn't have a deadline for the audience until just active fighting starts on screen. Until
Yes.
the land war,
The third
third act. That's the only time that there's a
yeah.
deadline. Oh,
Which is why it's
they
great.
finally met and they're fighting, so there's something happening.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
right, yeah.
Yes. Now, I just put this on here because I think it speaks to. So this is supposed to be an arc plot Hollywood cheeseburger, and it's not constructed to function that way, and that's why it feels so off, in my opinion. As simple as that.
Do you think, like, you know, that the Trey Parker writing thing where he talks about when you write one scene, you say "and therefore" instead of saying "and then"? You know,
I think that is also informed stuff.
Well, it feels like that's like the problem here with most stuff. They're just kind of, this happens and then this happens and then
do you
this
want to
happens.
explain it, Jamie?
Yeah. And and there's a funny thing I'll say about that too, because I was thinking the same thing. So there's a video out there with the South Park guys, and I share this with so many clients and stuff like that. It's almost always, it's like a staple. I'm almost always, especially when you get in the fun and games or Act 2A territory, this happens a lot. But what it is they basically get up on the board and they say, you know, when we're outlining, we'll write, you know, what happens. So it'll be like, I don't know, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to negotiate, and then someone tries to kill them, and then something happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And what they say is when they find themselves writing and it's not because of this
or therefore
or but or something, something that causes the thing. So the first thing causes the one. So I'll give you an example in this. So I actually think George knows this rule, and he tries to patch things with bad therefores and buts sometimes. So instead of like giving you what you want to see on the train tracks, he kind of just uses little patches to make it feel like it. So I'll give you an example. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan hide in the spaceship and go to Naboo. And then, we'll just say and then for this one, they discover an army is attacking. And then he saves Jar Jar. Therefore, so he does do a therefore there. So occasionally we'll patch. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to visit Jar Jar's people. Okay, so he does have like little patches here and there,
Mhm.
but they're in between a lot of and thens and thens. By the way, there's 2 scenes in this movie that every time I see, there's 3 really. Every time I see, they just make me laugh or something. And the one scene is when he saves Jar Jar. That scene is hilarious to look at.
Get out of the way.
He's like
really
running
good.
in his robes, hey! And you don't even know what's going on. It's out of context. It's these big spaceships. It's not really scary or anything. It looks silly almost because I'm sure Liam Neeson was running in front of a green screen. He's just like, hey, you, get out of the way, get out of the way. And it's like, that's the big life-saving moment, you know? Anyway, that's scene 1. Maybe we'll get to scene 2 later. I'll save that for later.
No, but when I was watching, this is kind of the thing, and it really, what it speaks to, what a lot of times what causes this when I'm reading scripts from new writers is the tendency to keep stuff off screen for the sake of pace. And so usually when someone, it's basically, in order to get causation, it needs to be sequential, right? And so when you're skipping past things, like for instance, the Viceroy droids, when the Viceroys come to the planet, the droids say, we've captured the Queen. Well, we didn't see that. That happened off screen. So that's what makes those scenes feel like, and then this happens. Because what the story is doing is it's either from the editing process, somewhere along the lines, they decided this important story moment they couldn't show it, whether it didn't turn out well, or it took too long, or it was too expensive, so they cut it out. Regardless, doing this thing where you keep things off screen in between, like you sort of imagine you have a series of events on an outline, and if it goes from the letters of the alphabet, I call it the A to Z, right? So you go A happens, then B happens, then C happens, then D happens. If you're making it with all of your story DNA, then everything's gonna have causation. So B happens, therefore C happens, therefore D happens. If you take D and F and put them off screen, then all of a sudden it just feels like there's no momentum. It's like, oh yeah, and then while we were from between scenes, all this other stuff happened off screen in between to get us to here. And there's so many things, like in Tatooine, what's his name? Qui-Gon's like, I've acquired a pod in a game of chance, the fastest ever built. And you're like, what? When did that happen? Like, where is this pod? Why isn't Anakin racing in this pod that's the fastest ever built? Why is he racing in some piece of shit?
Wait.
I think that was his cover story. Yeah, that was his cover story.
That was his cover story.
Wait, so he was just lying?
Yeah, because
he was lying to Watto.
He didn't want Watto to know.
Yeah, that was a lie.
Because then
all this time I thought he's a Jedi. He doesn't lie. So I was like, oh, he got
they're not pure
pod?
souls. No.
That's my fault. That's my fault.
Which honestly, if they'll lie, why can't they just steal the part? That's the part that always drives me crazy.
Well, anyway, there's a lot of meandering in Tatooine. The Tatooine part in particular is, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Then they go to Anakin's house, and then they eat dinner, and then so it's just, I think this is another reason.
And then there's a sandstorm, and then there's a it just goes on.
And I think that this is,
and that's the funniest shot in the movie for me, Jamie, is them walking.
That's the other one. That was my second.
Oh, really?
I laugh at it every time because
they just have their arm up like, and then
Jake is like overacting, like he has his hands totally hidden. And then the other, like Liam's barely doing it, and it's the weirdest scene. And the sound effects are a little off, and they didn't do enough, like with the digital, to make it really look like a bad. Like they should have just overdone the sandstorm. It looked like they shot it in like one shot. Like George was like, okay, that's good, and then he just moved on. That is,
it's in a wide panning shot on a fucking tripod. It's great.
They're my two favorite. Every time I look at them, I just shake my head and laugh.
I can't believe we were thinking of the same shot. That's
it. That's the one. Yeah.
But anyway, when you're writing, again, like this doesn't matter so much in an anti-plot or a mini plot where it's like you can just hang out. And that's like what the audience is coming for, that type of experience.
That's not what this movie is.
When you're writing an arc plot Hollywood cheeseburger story, like you need to have causation. The audience wants causation. They want momentum. They want everything to feel like it's interconnected. They want closed loops. And a great lesson is to just ask yourself those very basic questions. If you're just saying and then, that's not good enough. You need to make it consequential, what's happening in the scene, so that by the end of that scene, it creates momentum and therefore this happens, or but then this happens because of what happens in your first scene. So,
and he doesn't just end then. It's like it almost feels like he end thens, and then there's another and then you add Jar Jar and thenning.
Yeah,
On
there's
top of the scene where you're just
and then on
then.
top of and then
And
there's
then Jar Jar
certainly
falls.
causation, like
Right.
Jamie said, and that was a great way to put it, Jamie. While I was watching it,
Mhm.
I said exactly that thing to myself, like, this is such a patch.
He does little
Like-
patches,
Just little band-aid over the
You
problem.
know, you said something interesting though there, that keep in mind a lot of this stuff, if George is to be believed, and he's changed his story many times over the years, like, and I know this material's out there, but he kind of, this is stuff he wrote a long time ago in some ways that he's adapting, almost like it's a history in a weird sort of way. He's changing it on the fly. But you know, the Journal of the Wills and how Anakin came to be Darth Vader and all this stuff. So in some ways he's adapting it. And it's almost like adapting history, which is a lot of times when you get this kind of lack of causality, because things randomly happen because it's a history and it's not a story.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's almost like maybe that's part of the problem here, is he has so much stuff in his brain that he's been thinking up over the years, and he's trying to adapt it. And maybe it's less of a story and more just like a history book.
That's why it's also filled with like double mumbo jumbo and exposition of the ass and everything.
The what you're reminding me of, Jamie, we've talked about a lot on this show, which is, to your point and to George's, POV of this, like, it is a story that is based on destiny, right? And you've said in the past, Jamie, that like when destiny is in play, causality kind of goes out the window, and like when stories are told based on destiny, that it absolves like coincidence, and it absolves a lot of things, because destiny is supposed to be at play, and we,
it's
as
not just
audience,
that. It's real life audience knows the destiny.
That's what I'm saying. Destiny
it's not even just
the audience knows where it goes.
Right. Yeah. It's like that, the prequel.
So like the concern for not worrying about causation and momentum the way that we are talking about to teach writers, he probably was going like, well, they know where it's going. This is destiny, man.
Do you guys think, like, when you're writing something like this, like a prequel, if somebody's in writing a prequel, like, I don't know if that's like a class or something,
who's gonna have to do that?
I don't know, I'd have to do that. but like the true success of this movie or something like this movie would be momentarily making me think Anakin might actually not make it.
Finding a way to tap into create the drama,
to find a way to execute it in a way where I actually might believe that the people I know will survive might actually not. Like, that'd be
the whole time I would be trying to either figure out a way to make things happen exactly like you thought, but not at all like you thought.
Right.
So it'd be like, the bad example would be, there's this Anakin guy, but somebody talented Mr. Ripley's him and becomes Anakin or something, I would be screwed.
That's amazing.
Right.
He's not really, his name's not really Anakin.
Right. Obi-Wan actually becomes Anakin. That's the switch, is like Anakin becomes Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan becomes Anakin, and that's our twist or something. That's what I would be trying to do. And I probably wouldn't get hired for the job because I'd try to do something.
But that's an interesting thing to do, because the whole audience knowing where it's going is it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
And these movies pretty much play out exactly, or even less than. This is my problem with the prequels. They kind of play out less than like your expectations, as opposed to like beyond with the twist.
Less exciting.
It almost feels like we can come up with better versions of the same story.
Yeah, I was gonna do the whiteboard and I decided not to, which is like, you have like in the last final moments, you have all these things that finally are the answers to how did this come to be. And it's like this whole movie was an exercise in just getting to the last final moments where Obi-Wan is now in charge of teaching Anakin.
Sometimes I wonder if maybe that's why the next generations respond to this better than I do. Because maybe they don't know that Anakin's
right. For them, it's all fresh.
Yeah, they just watch it straight and they don't know the big twist or something like that. And it's interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
Do we really tap into one-dimensional characters? I feel like we kind of did, but
No, we didn't
didn't-
really do that one, but I'll lump
Okay.
that together with the I'm sorry, I could do that even with the dialogue. But you know what might be interesting now? The visual context, because it kind of relates.
Okay.
Yeah,
Kinda
yeah. So
relates to
this
what you were
this
saying.
was mine. This was mine. And basically one of the most common. It's a very fancy way of saying show versus tell. And but I feel like show versus tell is too general and not like really explaining like the difference. And one of the most common things that I encounter is writers, they want to skip past all that stuff and keep the story moving. So like sometimes important moments happen and they keep it off screen on purpose, just like I was talking about, and then they talk about the stuff that happened. And it's hearsay because we didn't experience it for ourselves. So they're like, oh my God, all this crazy shit just happened in between scene A and C. And you're like, well, what? I feel nothing about that because I don't know what that looked like. I don't know how it impacted the people in the scene. I can't tell you how to feel about, I can't understand how to feel about what you're telling me because I didn't experience it myself, right? And this movie is filled with examples of that, but mainly for me is the confusing stakes of Naboo, which is, you know, and Bob, you can go into this whole part that where I'm now after 30 something times seeing this movie still confused
It's
and
been 26 years.
misunderstanding what's happening in the movie. So like, but I'll just give you some lines and then Bob, you can correct my misunderstanding and we can just show. Okay, so for me, one of the main problems, speaking to that story DNA that we just went over and understanding what we're supposed to feel and what we're supposed to root for, all those things, is we lack complete visual context to the suffering and devastation of the people of Naboo. It's all hearsay. There's never a moment where we're shown anybody on Naboo suffering in any way, shape, or form. So you have the councilman, which I've learned didn't actually happen, which is the death toll is catastrophic. And I thought, Jamie, that George Lucas, to what we just were talking about before, I thought George was putting a patch on it and being like, I don't want to show the death toll, so I'll just have them debate whether the death toll is actually happening. That way, none of the kids in the audience can be upset by it. And then there's all these other lines, like Padme to Palpatine says, "Our people are dying, Senator. We must do something." What people?
Who's dying?
Who's
How?
dying?
What are they
How
doing?
are they dying?
Yeah.
What is she talking about? But I'm just going to give a couple more.
Yeah, you go for it. Yeah.
A couple more examples. Padme goes to the Senate and she says, she pleads with them to side with her. I was not elected to watch my people suffer and die at the hands of invaders. What the fuck is she talking about? There's no suffering and dying as far as I can tell. And then when they go to the Gungans and they're like, let's get the Gungans help. Jar Jar's like, the Gungan city has been abandoned. And Obi-Wan says, I think they were taken to the camps. What camps? And then Captain Panaka, when we're gearing up for the third act and they're making the plan to like storm the ship and knock out communications to the droid army, Captain Panaka says to Queen Amidala about the plan, almost everyone is in a camp. This is a battle I do not think we can win. So they're implying that there's these prison camps that all the suffering and devastation of the people of Naboo are experiencing, but it's all hearsay. Now I want to compare it to how George Lucas pulled this off efficiently without showing much and tonally aligned in Star Wars. They show us the Death Star destroying Princess Leia's planet Alderaan, and they show the entire planet being destroyed. So they and then they put a face on those stakes by showing Leia like mourning while watching the destruction of her planet. And then they cut to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is like his own version of devastation. He talks about how he just felt like 1,000 voices scream into the night. And between those 1, 2, 3 punches, we understand the stakes, and we're able to feel that loss, and we're able to feel fear of the next loss that we want them to prevent with the Death Star. This story is missing the destruction of Alderaan.
But
so
before I get to the one thing we talked about, I do want to add one more thing to your list, which is a weird one. The movie ends very famously with Boss Nass screaming peace, right? And he's holding up that blue thing,
weird
right?
Whatever
thing,
that
yeah.
is.
But I mean, I want to just point out to you guys that this has always bothered me, is that especially on this watch, is like there isn't, outside of the Trade Federation stuff, if that didn't happen, before that happened, before the Viceroy attack, the discord between the Gungans and the surface people seems like they just sort of don't like each other. Nothing's
Right.
actually, there's no war between them. They just sort of think it's like New York and New Jersey versus Baltimore type stuff. Like they're all kind of
Pittsburgh and
assholes.
Baltimore.
Yeah, it's like they're all kind of assholes. We don't like them. Fuck them. But there's nothing actively happening. And then the entire ending of the movie, the triumphant reward for everything, is the peace on Naboo between those two people that weren't at war and fighting at all
in front of our face. Yeah,
but
we never.
There's nothing. There's no visual context of the actual turmoil on Naboo between those two factions.
Like from the crawl.
Yeah.
It's more like Mexico, Mexico and the U.S. or something.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying
I don't know. Not that they hate each other.
The movie ends with screaming peace with the two of them, and I'm like, but the point. You two fighting wasn't what the movie was about, so why is that? You just think, I mean, Boss Nass literally says, "Oh wait, you don't think we're dicks?" Like that was much. Like that's how we make up. It was such not a conflict that them kneeling before him just made him go, "Okay, everything's fine." We don't. It's nothing.
Yeah. It felt, even in the beginning, like my sense was always it's more like apathy toward one another. Like, we don't like them. We don't deal with them. They don't deal with us. That's the way it is. We don't help them.
It's just odd that the movie ends on that triumphant note of those two people making up.
we don't have theme on this, and I don't even want to attempt to figure out what the theme of this is. But there's that whole thing where Obi-Wan goes, you must know this. You are symbiotic. You have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as I'm vomiting, I'm realizing that's the theme stated somehow. But I don't really know. I didn't really dig into it because I'm like,
one thing in Impact's. He's talking about causation.
Yeah.
No, but I put this on the list because I think it's a very common problem with scripts that I read, which is all of the stakes are intangible. They're happening off screen. Everything that we're supposed to fear is never shown. We're never shown the worst case future outcome. Like in the Death Star, Alderaan exploding achieves very efficiently. That's what I'm talking about. You don't have to do much, and they put a face on it by Leia. It was her planet.
In Lord of the Rings, there's a vision of the hobbits enslaved by, Sauron, right? That's like we see it through a vision of what could happen.
You need, there's going to be some more of me asking you guys to rewrite it and me rewriting it.
Sure,
we don't usually like to do this, but in this case, I think it's interesting. Imagine if you put.
Well, hold on before you get there. Let me just talk about the one thing.
Oh yeah.
Let me talk about this one thing because this is like.
I'm sorry, Bob.
It's okay. I know, but I just want to get it out. So the one thing Jimmy was talking about, the visual context of like the C.O. Bibble is the name of the character that we're talking about. He's the one in the message that they receive when they're on Tatooine that says, it's the transmission that says, the death toll is catastrophic. We must bow to their wishes. You must contact me. And earlier, Jimmy, you were saying privately, you were like, where's that catastrophic? Where's that happening? And I was like, well, that's a fake message. And you're like, it is? How do we know that? And I'm like, well, we don't know that from what the movie tells us, but it is a fake message that Darth Maul made himself off screen that is never told to us in any way by anyone. Like the movie itself does that, and then nobody says this was a fake message. You don't see Darth Maul constructing it or editing it or anything.
So the off-screen movie part is that Darth Maul made a message with this guy's face and then sent it, trying to pull them out, smoke them out.
Trying to smoke them out. But that is it's not revealed by Darth
There's no
Sidious.
evidence of that.
Evidence of that
in the
at
movie
all.
whatsoever. and the reason that I'm
Right.
confused is when they get to the planet, when they get back to Naboo, that guy immediately starts saying to like Natalie Portman, the death toll, everybody's suffering. So like I was like, oh, okay, like so everything that he's saying was true, like even though we
Right,
can't
but
see it.
I don't think there was a mass catastrophic death toll. I think that was added by Darth Maul.
Right, okay.
Like he made it worse. Like people are in camps. That's bad. This is 100,000%.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
bad. But he added the spice on there with his deep
Yeah.
fake.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're
And-
saying when she's going to the Senate, she's giving out misinformation, basically. She doesn't know it, but she's been misinformed. So
she
she's
thinks
saying,
it's way worse than it is.
I didn't sign up for this to let I'm not going to let my people die, and they're not actually dying.
Darth Maul, in essence, pushed Amidala to actually move her character forward by lying.
Which is Sidious's plan. Okay. All right.
Which is ahead of its time in this.
Yeah. I think the fact that that's a thing that happened that nobody says or sees is nuts.
The fake news subplot.
The fake message.
They deep faked.
Because it also, think about it, Jimmy. Think about it. If C.O. Bibble did send that message, why would he do that? Also, like,
I just thought he was dumb.
But how do you, but Bob? How do you?
I did. I just thought that was a dumb thing to do.
Honestly, I don't think I paid attention to any of this in this watch. Like, I just didn't care. But how do you know he did this? Like, what?
Because I looked it up. I
don't know.
Well, how did they know?
Oh, it's confirmed. It's confirmed in another Star Wars thing.
It's probably in a novelization. I see, in a Clone Wars or something.
It's canonically a fake message. Other people have asked this question
that George
too.
must have planned to put in. Maybe it's in another version.
Well, this would be a good. Not that I'd ever do it, but this would be a good one to read the novelization because I bet it fills in a lot.
I bet it fills that in.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's not said by anyone is nuts because it is very confusing. Of why is that guy saying that? If he knows how this all works, why would he tell them to give up their position?
Yeah.
Why is he saying something that's obviously untrue? A bunch of people aren't being slaughtered, right? Like mass death is occurring. Like,
okay. Well, what we do know is that there are people in prison camps on Naboo. That's confirmed.
That's true and happening from what we know.
So, however, we can't feel anything about that because we don't see it.
Right.
So, my medicine for this when I'm helping clients is, okay, you got to put a face on the stakes. You got to make it personal. You got to connect us with a character we can follow around and feel things about. Better yet, someone we already care about. And you put them at stake and you watch how they're experiencing these things, and it's like veering toward them experiencing the worst case future outcome.
Yep.
And then that's how we go, oh man, I don't want this to happen. They have to prevent the villain from succeeding so that this person can no longer suffer. And an easy way to do that is to put Jar Jar in the camp. And then we're cutting back to Naboo when they're talking about it, and Jar Jar's working with the Gungans he's in the camp, and they're suffering and they're trying to get out. And
I think you just saying that out loud, like I said before, I think this is not a writing issue with George here. I think he didn't want to show these types of things.
Yes.
And so it's not that he didn't know you probably should show it. He avoided all types of like capture and torture and death.
Yes. And my point is, then tell a different story if you're not going to make the stakes tangible.
I agree.
Something else.
I don't know why
hearsay does not. My point for this, from a writing standpoint, is hearsay about stakes doesn't work. You can't feel something about. You say, my friend had this thing happen to him in the cage on this planet. It's really scary. You can't feel anything about that. You have to see the person in the cage suffering in order to feel.
Jar Jar behind a set of bars. It'd be fine. Yeah, that's fine.
It wouldn't take much. So anyway, that's why I put that on there.
Yeah. Exposition.
Jamie, I feel like you can bounce off of me because I think like some of the stuff you've been circling about has to deal with exposition. I have a few things I want to talk about. Like every piece of exposition techniques that we've talked about on 116 episodes of this show, this movie does the opposite of Mr. DNA in Jurassic Park. Every time we're learning something really important, it's literally people sitting in a room asking really obvious questions.
They might as well just direct address the camera half the time. Just like, this is what happened. This is what's happening.
The first one I want to go into before we go into the easier ones to talk about is the treaty. What is the treaty? It's like, in this case, it's a confusing exposition. I don't understand what the treaty is that they're trying to get her to sign in order to, like, what is it?
Yeah,
neither of you guys can answer.
That's a good
It's
point.
like,
I don't really know.
What is her? She's saying like, yeah, you're allowed to
Tax us?
us or
we'll
something.
pay.
We'll pay.
We'll pay the tax.
So this first example was to just kind of show, like, even though they talked, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dialogue scenes that I put on this paper
About the treaty.
And none of us can tell you after all these years what is the treaty about.
Unless it's
What
like
is it?
her giving a power, but they don't say that.
Well,
So I don't fucking know. Yeah.
honestly,
That's a problem, dude.
It's really a big problem.
and when I start to think about it, I wonder if the tax people are actually in the right. Maybe Naboo's like owes back taxes. I don't know what the deal.
Right, like, what is this treaty, and why do we want her to not sign it?
Oh,
And
also-
what happens if she signs it besides Sidious
Jimmy,
getting his way?
In your listing of that, who is mostly talking about it? Like, is it what forces are mostly mentioning it?
Newt and Darth Sidious, but they're not
So,
telling
okay.
us, like,
Okay,
That sounds like a red
I know.
herring.
I don't want to jump forward too much, but like,
okay, here we go. They need her to sign a treaty to make this invasion of theirs legal. You can't afford to kill her. No, that's Captain Panaka. I'm sorry. What does that mean, to make this
the invasion legal?
So they're trying to legalize the invasion?
So also, but what I guess my point is, Darth Sidious's plan. Well, I know we're going to talk about it, but it essentially works.
Yeah,
It works. I don't know what adding that treaty part does.
I
to his
agree.
plan either. You know what I mean? Like,
I
why aren't they
don't
just?
understand? Yeah. So anyway,
They're
as
stopping
far as,
trade, so she signs a treaty to say that stopping the trade is legal.
yes, basically, so that they can invade.
God, I have never thought about that in 24
and my
years.
point
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
so like my talking point is exposition done wrong. And in this case,
I don't
we
even.
have-
I can't even think about it. It's giving me a headache.
it's 16. We have 16, and the
I'm not.
whole plot is based on her signing this treaty. I don't even know what the fuck this treaty is about. Why it's important to them that she signed it. Why we shouldn't want her to sign it. At the very least, so my patch on this would be at the very least, and this is what's an interesting thing about the movie.
Wait! At the beginning, the viceroy say, "You know that our blockade is perfectly legal." Right? He says that.
Wait,
He says that at the
yeah,
beginning, our blockade is
Yeah.
perfectly legal.
yeah.
So the treaty.
The
is
queen
also-
and I, here's the viceroy. The queen and I will sign a treaty that will legitimize our occupation here. I have assurances that the treaty, when produced, will be quickly ratified by the Senate.
So they want to live on the planet?
Well, maybe they want to occupy it, like, almost like an occupier would, and enforce like that they pay their taxes or
Yes.
something like that.
Okay, that
I don't know.
we're calming
But
down.
at the but you understand at the beginning he says our blockade is legal.
He does.
Well,
Oh,
he
my
might
God.
think it's legal. It's politics, so maybe.
Right.
But and maybe I don't know.
But
Anyway, I wanted to just point out that
But
we have-
basically, she's allowing an occupying force. Like, she's going to sign over to this group
And
that's
let
an
them
occupy
it, yeah.
They'll occupy. They'll police the place. They'll make sure
Okay.
they.
But
follow
look how long it took for us to even come to that
All right.
weak ass description, right?
So here's what's even crazier. There is no treaty in the movie. Like, we don't actually see a form. And what's interesting is there is in the script. I have the script. It's on the page whenever they're talking about it. It's like a visual, physical object. And in the finale, when she says, what's the line? Now, Viceroy, we'll discuss a new treaty. She actually picks up the treaty that they've been shoving in her face, and she tears it up and throws it at him. And at least that's something, right?
That's a visual.
Yes.
There's
I mean,
a treaty.
yeah, they have her pick up some guns and badass, but she could have picked up the gun and blew it up.
I never really even think of paper and pen as part of the Star Wars, but I guess the Journal of the Whittles is a book.
Yeah, there's paper. Anyway, it's just at least they could like put some drama. Like, you know how like they like always putting things in people's faces in Star Wars movies, like do this thing, or put this series. If they make her,
what's
like,
a callback?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, that's the first one.
Also, I won't keep this going that long, but the reason
we're still talking about
hold on a sec. The reason the blockade is bad is because it's stopping all goods and services being delivered, right?
Yep.
Thus, because Naboo itself does not produce goods and services. It doesn't have anything. So them wanting, it's weird that they want to occupy a place that doesn't have anything. It's just like a rich place that
is
gets
any of it real though?
No, but you understand.
Lie?
They're desperately want to occupy a planet that has nothing and needs to get all of its stuff from other places.
How did they get rich if they don't have any resources? Like Saudi Arabia needs oil. To be
I don't know.
Really.
It's
now
not
we're
real.
not talking about writing anymore. It's anyway.
But that's internal logic of what's happening.
The internal logic is off. But I just wanted to put it on there to show how, like, even with all of these scenes where everyone is talking about the treaty, you still don't understand, just like Indy 4, what the hell everybody's talking about or why we should feel anything about it. There's no with regards to the treaty, as far as the villain's plan side of things, there's no photo finish for that. It's really, there's no understanding of what happens. The
like
stakes for that photo finish.
Why not make
it
Amidala concede your throne to me or something?
Yeah,
like that. At least that makes sense.
I mean, that's so much better, Bob. Wow.
Yeah, and I just said that out of my ass. I didn't.
Anyway, it's worth workshopping these things so that it's easy for the audience to understand them. So that 25 years later, 3 guys who have seen the movie 10 times aren't talking for 10 minutes about what the fuck they just watched.
The treaty is the best, man. I love it.
Okay, so the second part is beware the technobabble, the midichlorians, and this to me is the worst one in this story. It is very much like how you see in the beginning writer, where it's like, Master Sir, I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I have been wondering, what are midichlorians? And then you pause the story, and he says, well, midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells. And then they go and they explain it. And it's very much the antithesis of the Mr. DNA video. They're kind of similar topics, right? And think about the differences in those two things. We're talking about DNA.
Mind you, we're not even criticizing right now the fact that people hate midichlorians as a reason.
No.
Midichlorians as an idea. I'm talking about the execution of making us care about them and be interested in them.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, my rewrite solution would be like, imagine if they made that visual, right? If they we saw that he's looking at these graphics and that they're doing all these technological stuff that's visual, but it's off screen. You don't see any of that stuff. Imagine if he like pulled up this blood sample and we see these cool things within the blood, and he's telling the story while we're seeing the midichlorians interacting in the blood, and like you could make it so cool, I think, if you just made it visual, if you gave us visual context, right? It's, once again, hearsay evidence is very difficult to feel anything about when you're not seeing anything and you're just hearing someone talk about something. This is another example where it's like all hearsay, right? We don't get anything visual. They say like Master Yoda has it's even higher than Master Yoda's. If there was a way to like compare them somehow, you know, have like 2 graphics and be like, holy shit, here's Master Yoda's, which is our highest on record, and here's this kid on Tatooine, like there's just, it could have been the same exact scene, but if they made it visual and allowed us to like connect with it in some way other than just words,
or I mean, as an editor speaking, you could move that scene to like during the pod race, where he's describing what it does to you and saying it makes your reflexes and your surroundings, and it keeps cross-cutting to Jake, like, you know, zooming in and out of
they're
stuff,
getting the evidence,
you know?
from Obi-Wan talking, like, we just got the results.
And we're seeing the results of having midichlorians that high. Yeah, he's the only human who can do it. Why? Midichlorians are doing it, right?
And then it's just a way to visualize and help us connect with what's special about it. Yeah,
right, something like that.
That was the second one, and then so this is these are the two more interesting ones for me, which is the late breaking. I have a note that's late breaking news, right? When something that's really, really important that we haven't been given like intrigue about, like no one mentioned a Jedi prophecy this entire movie. And then all of a sudden, we get late breaking prophecy news at an hour and 26 minutes, which is 67% of the movie. They're like, oh, are you talking about this prophecy no one's talked about for the entire movie? And it's just like, it's another version of the midichlorians. I heard there was a prophecy. What is it? You know, like, and then even then you barely get anything. Like, what did we get? I request the boy be tested. Trained as a Jedi, you request for him. Finding him was the will of the Force. I have no doubt about it. Like, that's it. That's all we get about
our meeting was not by chance. Remember he says that?
Yeah, like that's all we get about the prophecy. So even then, like, we don't really hear anything about the prophecy.
Even though, you know, you guys said the thing about patching, him saying, like, Qui-Gon saying our meeting was not just by chance. That feels like George.
That's the
literally
Destiny
patching.
Patch.
Yeah, like, I mean, because outside of him saying that, it kind of feels like you just ran into this kid. It doesn't feel like
I run into writers a lot who have ideas, but they feel like they're too bored to write them out. Like they want to put the idea in, like they're too bored to kind of come up with scenes or something. So they just say it. They just say like, "There's a Jedi prophecy," or we were meant to. But like, to me, this whole story would have been so much more interesting if it was treated almost like a supernatural thriller or something. Like, this kid has mystical powers. What's going on? He's special. There's something weird about him. And it's a mystery. And then you find out the prophecy, you know, blah, blah, blah. You could even back end the prophecy if you did that as the reveal. So instead, like, Obi-Wan would be sneaking around, stealing his toothbrush to study him or something. I don't know, to get his midichlorian. You're like, what are you doing? Why did you steal my toothbrush? And you know, and then whatever. But I think the whole thing, it's a show not tell version of this. Instead of just saying, what are midichlorians? You show this whole, through drama and through obstacles and tension and all the storytelling tricks. You tell a story, and in that story, these things are revealed as answers we want to hear.
We are just desperate to hear about this prophecy.
You could also make testing for midichlorians not so easy, right? I mean, like, George is making this stuff up,
but you have to think about it. Like,
he literally pricks him and just sends the data away. I'm like, what if they're like, the only way we'll know his midichlorian count is if he actually achieves this, or he does something.
They're using the Force,
right.
Force test.
But imagine, like, again, if I would have written this, again, supernatural thriller. But imagine if he's playing around with them and he uses that stupid ball with the shield test or something. You know?
Their own version of that, right?
Their own version, and we get it. We're
even
like,
Master Yoda can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how I would do it. Like,
so anyway, I thought it was interesting. And then in the same scene, because you have to think, we say this out loud, and there's just like endless Star Wars grimoires that have all of this out there. But the thing is, they weren't out there when this movie was made.
No.
So in 1999, no one had ever talked about the prophecy. It's not in the OG trilogy, anything about the prophecy. And in the OG trilogy, no one talks about the Sith disappearing for years before they resurfaced. So this is all new information to the audience who's coming to see this for the first time.
By the way, in that first draft, apparently there was no fate or Jedi prophecy aspect.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how they got around it, because they still did have the apprentice and all that stuff.
Okay.
But I know
That's cool.
that's one of the big things it did not have.
I almost dislike as a fan. I almost dislike the prophecy more than the
I do
midichlorians.
too.
More
Yeah,
than the
me too.
midichlorians. I don't like
Yeah.
midichlorians, but like.
But I also think
I think
Go
the
ahead.
prophecy talking about Vader being born as a virgin birth and then him taking them down. I'm like, what the fuck?
It made me cringe.
So you made like one of the most significant villains in cinema history somehow the guy is destined to save everything. What are you doing,
A
dude?
savior. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
yeah.
confusingly
It's-
themed. It's like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
But
No, like,
but
what's that saying about anything?
I don't get it. I
Yeah.
still don't to this day
Like,
fucking
no,
get
but
it.
I honestly think part of the problem is the execution of that
Yeah,
prophecy
yeah.
is very underwhelming and not compelling. And if it had been executed like the first 7 minutes
But-
of Sauron, Lord of the Rings, no one says that prophecy or that, that
Like, but do you realize the prophecy is basically saying one day this kid is going to throw an old man down a hole? Like, that's everything. Is he's going to throw an old guy that he defies down a hole?
but he won't actually die.
Yeah,
Yeah, I forgot that too.
He'll be a Phantom Menace for 2 more movies,
he'll be back.
and then reveal that
Right,
he never
right.
died ever.
They'll make a
Darth
clone.
Vader
But,
didn't
okay,
actually-
okay.
Something.
To
Darth
be
Vader
fair-
didn't actually do anything
To
important.
be fair,
in
when
that
this was
moment.
written, though, George knew the whole thing.
Yes.
And in the end, they're all the Jedi counts and stuff when they're talking about the prophecy. They just mean he's going to pick a guy up and throw him in a hole one day.
He brought balance to the Force, dude.
But
But
do you
they don't even
understand
talk
the
about
underwhelming
it.
nature of that?
Yeah, and they don't even talk about it. So,
I never understood balance to the Force, to be honest.
I don't
so
still don't
that's
understand
because
it.
the stories don't give you enough to chew on.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like, why don't I just want the good side, not the bad side? I don't need the balance.
Okay, so I'm going back to one more exposition scene.
Okay,
then we move
okay.
Forward. And it's the same scene. It actually is before the prophecy thing, but late breaking villain news. It's the same thing. It's the dark prophecy, or like he was trained in. So an hour and 25 minutes in, no one has talked about the Sith as like a threat to the story world, or an old threat. They're not mentioned that at all. In fact, when they show up, this is on a different topic, but so the fight onto Tatooine, Darth Maul shows up an hour and 20 minutes into the movie, by the way, is the first time that the heroes and the villains collide. He survives the fight, and Obi-Wan says, "What was that?" and Qui-Gon says, "I don't know, but he was trained in the Jedi arts. My guess is he was after the Queen." And Anakin says, "What are we going to do about it?" It says, Obi-Wan gives Anakin a "what are you going to do" look. That's actually in the script. Anakin returns an innocent stare. Qui-Gon says, "We will be patient." And then he says, "Anakin, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi." They don't even like address it. It holds zero weight. He's not like, this guy almost killed me. I think he's this evil Sith Lord that used to be a big problem. I'm not worried about it. We will be patient is Obi-Wan's response to Darth Maul.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Don't worry about that.
Qui-Gon. We will be patient. Obi-Wan doesn't even address it further. He had skills like the Jedi arts. That's insane, dude.
Who was that? Some guy. I don't know.
So my
Just
point
some
is,
dude.
so then we've got another 6 minutes of the movie, 5 minutes of the movie, and then we have this Jedi Council, and he's like, "I think it was a Sith Lord," and they're like, "A Sith Lord? They've been extinct for millennium." And Yoda says, "The very Republic is threatened if involved the Sith are," and that's it. They don't go into it further. There's no understanding of what that means. What does that mean? Can you give us something? We're just like, and then the movie keeps going. So it's once again like
it's moments like in the ship when he goes, "What was that?"
Yeah,
It's a guy that seems like he knows what he's doing.
That doesn't
that kind
matter.
of dialogue is so
what
funny
matters
to me.
is we have to have Anakin and Obi-Wan meet. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Meet Anakin Skywalker. Never mind this super crazy fucking guy who almost killed me. And no one's been able to almost kill me in my life. Anyway, so that's
Also, like Qui-Gon doesn't even mention the Sith. He has to
Yeah.
go to the council to know about. I don't know. It's just funny.
Yeah, he
Like,
does.
wouldn't he know?
He says to
He
the
does say it, but-
council, "My only conclusion is this is Sith."
You're
Why
right,
didn't he say that to Obi-Wan?
That's what I mean. In the
Yeah,
he
what
seemed
was
like
that?
a Sith Lord.
Anyway,
oh no,
I
it's the
thought it was
Sith.
important. Yeah, and then
Right.
in the villain's plan, I've got to suggest. I've got to tweak. I think
Okay.
fixes all
Well,
of that.
On the nose dialogue. Do you want to do that?
Jamie, go for it, dude.
Yeah. So I'll wrap one-dimensional characters a little bit into this. The one, because it kind of go hand in hand to an extent. So there was an article I once read on a website called theatrical whatever.com. And it's written just like it says. But anyway, it was about a thing called tensity. And tensity was like describing characters, ideas in a way that has tension. So in 2 words. And I have a trick like this where I say this meets this, even for characters. Like 2 characters might be Danny McBride meets I don't know, Luke Skywalker or something like that. Like, what is that? There's a tension there. It doesn't make sense. There's a conflict there. And this article actually uses Star Wars as an example. And it says even in world building, the tensity is in Star Wars is mystical versus science. It's like the 2 things.
Right.
And in Harry Potter, it might be magical meets mundane. Like, there's 2 converse tense objects in it. And then it goes on to describe characters. And it actually uses Luke as kind of a humble hero. Like, that's the 2 sides. I'd even say like naive hero or something like that. Or
Hey, Jamie, move your mic away just a little bit.
Away.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
So Princess Leia is a commanding damsel. Han Solo is a reliable rogue. So there's tension and conflict. There's multiple dimensions just by how you pronounce these characters. And it actually gives Obi-Wan kind of a sage warrior, like that's his thing.
That's good.
My thing in Phantom Menace is maybe Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are sage warriors. But I even wonder about that one. Like is how much of a warrior really is Obi-Wan or something? He's more of a sage. But a lot of their characters seem to lack this tension. And the one you can really point to the most is Jar Jar. So Jar Jar is just the fool. Like, that's all he is. Like, he has no other thing. Like, he's not the foolish warrior or the foolish mentor or something like that. He's just the fool. And a lot of the characters feel that way. Like, to me, even though you could describe Sage Warrior as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, they're kind of just one note, kind of, there's just nothing interesting about them. There's no conflict within them. There's no, like, they're one thing, but also another thing. They're just kind of one thing.
Like you mean like Jar Jar is not seeking acceptance again from his home world? He's just sort of bumbling around.
Yeah, he's just bumbling around.
He's not looking for something, right?
Or he's not a guy that's foolish, but wants to be a Jedi. You know what I mean? Like,
right, like in C-3PO is a fool, but he's a brilliant robot that speaks like 20,000 languages. So
he's useful.
Well, it actually, how they described him in that article was inconsiderate etiquette. Like, it's like both things, He's
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
And I think that's where you get what's interesting about people. Their 2 conflicting ideas are really. It's almost like that exercise we've done. What makes them funny? You know what I mean? But this is what makes them interesting. Like, what is it that makes them interesting? And I think this is kind of a pathway to it. But in Phantom Menace, they all seem to just be like one thing. Like, I can't really think of the 2 things the princess is, or Anakin. He's just the one thing. He is just the one thing. I don't really know what that is exactly.
It definitely tracks. Like,
it tracks.
Feel that.
Yeah,
you feel that. Yeah.
So
I think George Lucas wanted that. What you're saying? I think he wanted Jar Jar to be a fool that's like an idiot savant or something like that. But with like the end battle scene, Jar Jar actually accomplishes things in the end battle scene.
He does.
Yeah, and there's like a setup to it, and that's the payoff. There is a setup and a payoff there.
So the setup is, you're saying that if he wasn't just the fool, it wouldn't have the impact that it does?
Well, the setup is he got kicked out of his own homeworld for being clumsy, and then his clumsiness itself actually helps win the Battle of Naboo.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's something. It's not. I'm not saying it's good.
No, but that's something.
It's something.
That is good.
No,
that's well constructed.
I think to an extent George is responsible for a lot of these kind of decisions. Like he wanted, like he almost talks like, I like my characters that have stilted dialogue. It's kind of stylistic, like the old movies, or so he's almost like aiming low in some of these cases. Like he wants them to be kind of stiff and one-dimensional, I think, to some extent. So this leads to the dialogue. And this movie, Attack of the Clones is the best example of bad dialogue.
Sure.
It's almost fun to go in and talk about sand or something like that.
Yeah.
But this movie has equally bad dialogue. And the thing about bad dialogue and bad direction is it makes the actors seem bad. Like you get somebody like Natalie Portman that seems stiff as a board in this movie, and you're like, oh, she's not going to have a career because she's kind of just wooden and she's just flat. And the only guy that really kind of figures some things out is Qui-Gon. Figures some things out, I think, with his dialogue, and he's a little, despite the dialogue, he makes
Obi-Wan has like a line or two that is a little bit spice.
He has a line or two. So just to give you an example, go ahead, Jimmy.
No, I was going to say the one line that I really like is from Jake Lloyd is that, now that's pod racing. I like that line. Okay. Go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
So the other big thing with this movie is almost all the dialogue is on the nose. Like 98% of it is on the nose dialogue. And on the nose dialogue is when a character says exactly what's on their mind without going through any of their hang-ups or personal filters or having any characterization to massage out like how people really talk or to make it fun or interesting. Instead, they're just speaking their subtext. There is no subtext, okay? And I'll give you an example just from the opening scene. It's funny. The opening scene, somebody's at my door, opens with one line of dialogue. It opens with one line of off the nose dialogue, which is interesting. So, by the way, this is from some script online that has a little bit extra, but it's pretty close. So Obi-Wan, I have a bad feeling about this. So that's the one line of off the nose dialogue, and it's a callback. It's a joke, it's really. So then Qui-Gon says, "I don't sense anything, Obi-Wan. It's not about the mission, Master. It's something elsewhere, elusive. Don't center on your anxiety, Obi-Wan. Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs. But Master Yoda says I must be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment. Be mindful of the living force, my young Padawan. Yes, Master. How do you think the trade viceroy will deal with the Chancellor's demands?" I mean, so it's just people saying exactly, like there's no sarcasm to it. There's no...
Sounds like a porn script.
It does.
It's just, and you might say that's for, you might say that's the Jedis and they just talk like that because they're like priests and they're boring. But then when you get to a character like Anakin, for example, he talks, almost 100% in on the nose dialogue. Let me just find this super quick.
No, I was going to say real quick before you get to that.
Yeah.
I hate how many times Qui-Gon says the word sense in the opening scene. He says it like 3 or 4 times. It angers me every time I watch this movie. Like he says, I sense. Stop saying it.
Yeah, exactly.
They couldn't. You can't write a different way to say that. Okay.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
As an example, here's Anakin's. So it starts out with the cheesy, "Are you an angel? What? An angel? I've heard the deep space pilots talk about them. They're the most beautiful creatures in the universe. They live on the moons of Viego, I think." And it's like, first, I don't know. I can't even talk about the angel part. And then she's like, "I've never heard of angels. You must be one. Maybe you just don't know it. You're a funny little boy. How do you know so much? I listen to all the traders and star pilots that come through here. I'm a pilot, and someday I'm going to fly away from this place. You're a pilot? Mm-hmm. All my life. It's just everything's so on the nose. There's no character to it. It's just every single line is on the nose. And
when I met your father, he was a great pilot. Then he writes the movie. I'm a pilot,
Yeah.
Well, check box. You did it, George.
Yeah, and then it always the other weird thing is when she calls him a slave, and he's like, "I'm a person. My name is Anakin." It's like that's another one of my favorite moments from this movie. It's like when he says
that was the talking thing on the action figure. It said that had that clip.
Really?
Yep.
No way. It's like one of the worst moments of the movie.
Oh yeah, I know, but I had a toy that said it constantly.
I'm a person.
And my name is Anakin.
Yeah, it's just, and the whole thing is like that, and that's why I say it needs a Han Solo, but it really needs characterization. Like these characters.
That's you informed it by talking about the lack of tensity. Really informs that.
Yeah, because these characters don't have that tension. Like imagine if Anakin was, and almost this would be better in some ways for his character, like he was egotistical or arrogant or something like that, and he talked like this big show off that lied, or the words would come out differently. Or if even more interesting, if Qui-Gon was like that or something like that, like he was a cocky Jedi.
Yeah, like if he instead of saying I'm a pilot, the kid's like, I'm the best pilot in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Like, he'd be like,
and then he pulled out a switchblade comb and like,
yeah, right. It's like a 50s greaser.
Yeah, exactly.
No, like Jamie, what I was gonna say is, to use a really crude term, they all come off like dorks.
Right.
They all just come off. That's the thing about this movie is like, I do love it. There is nothing kind of cool about this movie except the fight scene at the end. It is like the dorkiest freaking movie there is, right? Jimmy is laughing his ass off. But like everyone seems so uncool without any charisma. The only time it actually,
Darth Maul, who doesn't really speak, but
that's because he doesn't say anything.
Really
he says nothing, and he's got like a tattooed face.
Menacing.
Got nice moves.
He's got cool moves, but there's nothing cool about this movie outside of the special effects, pod race, that lightsaber fight,
the lightsaber battle.
All the characters are they come off so stilted and dorky.
Yep.
I think it makes it interesting to me now, but that's just
like you said, it's a really
that's
weird
what the on the nose dialogue does, because
Mm-hmm.
like people speak like that. That's not a cool thing. Cool people deliver their thoughts with less words and more intent. I know I'm using cool like a 40-year-old man, but whatever.
Exactly though. You're absolutely right.
It's legit.
Anyway, that's it for the dialogue stuff.
Okay, the villain's plan.
Okay, so we touched on this a little. This
bit.
is mine, so we're gonna retread a little bit. But I wanted to bring up. So this movie does another thing that I read a lot in new scripts, which is a villain with a really confusing, hard to track, hard to connect with, hard to understand plan. And I think a lot of that is intentional, which is really weird. Like going back to the is Sidious one, I think they really wanted us to think like there might actually be two, like Palpatine and Sidious might be different people, different characters. This intentional
I can't believe that George
misdirection
would be that thick.
Otherwise, why wouldn't they show him putting the cloak on and taking the cloak off? Like even just the simple act of that would have been like, that's what he's doing.
Is there any listener that if anyone's listening that actually when they first saw this as kids were fooled by that, please let us know. Write us an email.
And that's what I was saying off the recording was that I had friends who were not Star Wars geeks like I was, who didn't have any affinity or watch the OG trilogy, and they were like, what's going on? Like, I thought, is that the guy? Like, even by the end of the movie, they were like, is that guy?
That guy's the other guy, right?
Same guy? Like, they were so confused.
Because that guy sounds and looks like that other guy.
Yeah. So, Jamie, I wanted to bring up photo finish here because the thing is, like, I think it speaks to, like the villain. Explain photo finish, and then I'll bounce off of you.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the story DNA thing that we talked about earlier. So remember, hero, goal, obstacle, stakes. The photo finish idea is you want to choose a goal that can be tracked and understood in a visual, almost cinematic way. And the one way to do that is if you can think of a finish line that you could literally take a picture of, like Indiana Jones finding the Ark. He finds the Ark. He has it. Yeah, I got it. He can hold it up. No, I don't know if he can. He needs Salah to help him. But that's a photo finish. You could take a picture of it, blowing up the Death Star. That's not the finish line, but imagine if it was. You could take a picture of destroying the Death Star. You want to find something as opposed to he wants to get over grief or he wants to be successful in life. And they're usually the ones that are harder to photograph. They're
the
usually
abstract ones, yeah.
And you're usually the wants that fill the goal, that fuel the goal. You know, like there's usually like he wants to be happy in life, so he goes on a weird quest. But and then there's an arc, and he gets what he wants. So the wants are still important. It's not like they're not there. But the photo finish is related to the actual goal that you pitched the movie.
And it's how the audience is able to track the progress, because we're made to understand early on, or at least by the midpoint, what the photo finish is, that we're rooting to see the image of occurring.
Yep.
And a lot of new writers misunderstand that, and they're focused on the reward. So like if we put it from a sports scenario, they will be like, my photo finish is the Super Bowl trophy being hoisted up. That's the reward. What's the photo finish is scoring the winning touchdown, right? So that's the difference. The goal is go ahead.
Yeah, and the bad version of that, that's interesting you say that, is imagine if you watched a sport and they said, we're going to tell you how you win at the end. Just do your best. Like just go out there and play football. It might be timed, it might be points. We're not going to tell you. Just go out there and do your best, and we'll tell you in the end. That's kind of what it's like if you don't have the photo finish. It's
exactly. We'll tell you what it's like. Yeah. And so couple things that this movie does, which is, so on that note, your villain in an arc plot Hollywood story also needs their own photo finish. And we need to understand, sometimes it's the same photo finish as the hero. So we're rooting for the hero to get to the photo finish before the villain does. But for instance, Star Wars, the OG Star Wars, A New Hope, their photo finish is the completion of the Death Star and successfully blowing up more planets, right? So we saw the Alderaan, their photo finish is like just continuing to do that thing, right?
Yeah.
So in this movie, I think, number one, it's hard to define what Palpatine and Sidious's photo finish is, number two. And the other thing is, I think there is a photo finish, and it happens off screen. Which is a thing that so Bob, you were the one who made note of that. Yeah.
Yes. I was laughing so hard at this. I was laughing so hard at this earlier. I was crying to myself. Like I was laughing with tears streaming down my face. But now it's not as funny because I got an answer for it. So he said, so basically the plan. Can I lay out the plan? Are you okay with
Yeah, lay out the plan. Yeah.
Okay, so Senator Palpatine is a senator on Naboo. That's his home planet. And secretly, he is Darth Sidious. Darth Sidious hired the Viceroy to do the treaty blockade thing. Right?
Yeah.
And the reason he did that was so that he could force Amidala to go to the Galactic Council and ask her to do a vote of no confidence to the Chancellor. Okay, keep with me. And when you do that, then you bring up the Galactic Council votes. I'm probably calling it the wrong name. They vote on who's the new Chancellor to step in for there. And Palpatine says it's between me, and then he says two other names I don't remember. So, okay. So the reason I laughed so hard earlier was I was like, well, wait a minute. The movie doesn't show us any of that, but also it doesn't tell us how Palpatine was sure that part of his plan was him getting picked or voted in. right? And so that happens off screen. He gets voted in because of the sympathy that the council has, or the government has, for what's happening in Naboo, and that's how he gets to be chancellor. What the movie doesn't tell us is the sympathy aspect and the fact that Darth Sidious is affecting the votes of several members of the voting body.
Yeah, like imagine seeing that.
Like we
right?
don't see that interaction at all. It's literally Ian McDermott like, yeah, it's between me and two other guys, you know? And then we see him later and he's like, hey, I did it. It's fucking hilarious, man. He just like the movie doesn't tell us anything else that's going on. It doesn't show us the vote. It doesn't show us the council or anything being sympathetic to what's going on in the boo.
Yeah.
Thus giving him the vote. All those moments lost like tears in the rain. It's just like fucking hilarious, man.
So you feel none of this, right? Like that's and
Him
as a
walking
result,
in a room.
yeah.
Hey, guess what? I'm the chancellor now. Oh.
I love it. I love it. I love
it's
how
amazing.
So from a screenwriting standpoint, I actually read this a lot, which is people have a sports story, for instance, and it's coming to its climax. We're in Act 3, and the big game happens off screen, and it cuts to the trophy. And the entire thing we've been building to is an off-screen event that lacks visual context, so we can't feel anything, and you just have the character going, we did it! Yes! And the writer doesn't understand that in order to feel anything about that victory, we need to see the trials and tribulations of the big game, the Super Bowl, right? I love how I'm saying big game as if we can't say the Super Bowl.
Can I give you a theory on this too?
Yeah.
Like, it's written, this aspect of the movie is written very much like you'd write a sitcom. Because in a sitcom, things that can't happen in the main set have to happen off screen, right? Like they don't have a set for it, so it has to happen off screen, and characters just say it happened. Right? Like this whole, it feels like, hey,
have a set for this.
I know, but what I'm saying is it's written like that. Like you'd have a character say, hey, I got elected chancellor, and then the audience laughs. Right, but that has jokes, and that's what that it's not about, seeing that stuff. But this is a Star Wars movie. You have a set. You should have a set.
Yeah,
they do have a set. They've been there. We've established where this would take place, and we're not seeing it.
It's crazy. So anyway, it's if you got a script out there, and it's an arc plot story, and your villain needs to have a photo finish. And we need to see that photo finish happen on screen in order for us to feel anything about it. You know, it usually if it's an arc plot story, the villain fails. That's another weird thing about this movie, which is like Palpatine ultimately succeeds, but since we're not aligned with his however you say that word, machinations, since we're not fully aligned with his machinations from fade in to fade out, that little wry smile he does at the end, it doesn't really land with the impact it would if the entire time we were like, oh shit, like he's still getting what he wants. And in the end, he ultimately gets what he wants. Yeah. But since
it also questions why Darth Maul, why didn't Darth Maul do the negotiations with the Viceroy?
That's yeah. So there's two things I want to say, and then we can move on to the next thing, which is, so that Coruscant balcony scene, this is another like, what is going on? The Coruscant balcony scene that's in the Duel of Fates MTV video, that's fucking great. It's in the trailers. And he says, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have our revenge. Terrible Darth Maul. In the script, that scene ends. The very next line is Darth Sidious saying, everything is going as planned. It is too late for them to stop us now. The Republic itself will soon be under my control. And instead in the movie, he says, you have been trained well, my apprentice. They will be no match for you. All you needed was to hear Sidious say, everything is going as planned. The Republic itself will soon be under my control. That clarifies his motivations
Yeah, but Jimmy,
and his goal.
the thought behind cutting that though is because George Lucas believed in the mystery of those two being separate, which doesn't work.
Who is this mysterious figure who looks just like Ian? And sounds just
the title
like the guy.
ruins the movie a lot. The title messes the movie up so much.
So I've got a patch I want to pitch to you in rewriting the movie. I'm sorry I'm doing this.
Okay.
I know I said I'd ask you guys to rewrite the movie too, but I
kind of did a little bit. Darth Maul should have been talking to the Viceroy. And
that's it.
He should be the villain of the movie, and Palpatine just gets elected Chancellor, and we never see Darth Sidious.
Man.
Darth Sidious should come later. Palpatine working behind the scenes the whole time, right?
You're pretty much doing exactly what I was going to suggest.
Okay.
Like let's give the OG the actual structure, which is okay at 21 minutes off screen. By the way, the Viceroy droids capture Queen Amidala. So a pretty well paced big time event. At 23 minutes, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan rescue the Queen from the droids. And at 25 minutes, they leave the planet. Darth Maul is sent to find them, but none of the characters know of his existence or threat. So the entire time on Tatooine, from 30 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes, they meander with no foreseeable threat from their perspective. And at hour and 20 minutes, Darth Maul attacks them. And once he attacks them, they're like, we'll just be patient. I don't know who that was, but it's not a big deal. If instead you take the same events, everything's the same, to your point, Bob.
Yeah.
At 21 minutes, you have Darth Maul kidnap the Queen on the planet, and with the goal of like using the Force to have her sign the treaty. And then at 23 minutes, just at the same time that we already have in the movie, you have Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have to fight Darth Maul to rescue Queen Amidala. They're like, who the fuck is this guy? They fight him. It's the hardest battle they've ever had in their life. They escape with Queen Amidala narrowly. And now at 25 minutes, we have our organic arc plot lock-in, right? At 25 minutes, just like the Hollywood audience loves, we got the lock-in where, holy shit, we got this mystery Sith who's hunting us. And I don't know if we're going to survive another battle against him. He wants the Queen. And the entire rest of the movie, there's organic reason. The Queen's like, who is this guy? And that organically brings up like, oh, holy shit. Like, I think that's a Sith. And you bring up this thing like 25 minutes in talking about this threat of the Sith. And you give context to all this stuff that's happening with Sidious. And then the discovery of, and that brings up the Jedi prophecy that's going to bring balance and like offset the Sith threat. And then when they meet Anakin, it feels like an organic, motivated potential solution to this Sith threat. Like, oh my god, it's all happening.
It also
right?
It also adds a physical like comparable duel to the Jedis, whereas before they're just fighting droids.
It's so the
droids are so useless.
It's like if Darth Maul is who they're fighting all the way then, and then he's after them the entire time, because like what's missing from Tatooine, and they start it like 30 minutes after they get to Tatooine when he arrives, is what's cool about Tatooine in A New Hope is the stormtroopers are after them the entire time. So like there's stormtroopers all around them. They're evading stormtroopers. They're using the Force to get around stormtroopers. The stormtroopers are right on their ass. They're everywhere. And if Darth Maul was right on their ass, like if Darth Maul was like showing up to the pod race, if Darth Maul was right on their ass and we already knew who he was and they did too, it would just be so, and you wouldn't have to do anything different. And it would just organically bring up the Sith prophecy and the Jedi prophecy, and it would make it right. And maybe like Darth Maul is like watching the pod race being like, holy shit, this is the prophesized kid. I got to kill this kid.
Anyway. If you add him in at the beginning, that beginning mark you said, it starts the conversation of the Sith being back early in the movie.
Right.
By the time we're at the end of the movie, we're all like, oh no, the Sith are a whole problem now. You know, like they're all back. You know, they're back.
You started, and then I think, Jamie, that gives us story DNA with the lock-in, which is Qui-Gon has just a very easy to follow goal, which is like, I've got the Queen.
I got to stop,
and I've got
to
protect her from this Sith assassin who's on our ass, and I'm not even sure if I can defeat him. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and then you have a formidable threat, and
Also,
the entire movie
and the
is just
Phantom
like,
is a Phantom.
yeah.
Because Darth Maul isn't Palpatine, and the Phantom is behind the scenes.
So I
Right?
had to flex my script butcher there.
No,
a little.
no, it's good. I think it's good.
I think it's crazy how just a little thing can make it so different and work.
What's funny is that version, Ian McDermott also gets paid and gets
Everything is
he's
yeah.
he's still in the movie. You're not like removing a character.
No, you still have all that stuff on Tatooine. You just have them worried about Darth Maul now.
You can even leave the Darth Maul Darth Sidious scene.
Yes, totally. You put that up sooner.
Yeah.
You put that, like, imagine, like, right off the bat, you see them hanging out. Like, at last we reveal ourselves to the Jedi. Like, scene 1. And you're like, oh, shit.
Oh, shit. Right.
And then he does. Yeah. Anyway.
It
wouldn't take much. The power of rewriting.
That's why I said this is it was all yes men.
Yeah.
He was surrounded by yes men. There was no second draft.
It feels like an underbaked draft. Like,
yes.
Now the studio gives notes, and you then go and develop these things, and you ask these questions like, does this Phantom Menace thing really work? How do we make it work? And then you go change that, and then you change a few things. Yeah. It gets better, but it really does feel like, and honestly, all the interviews I hear from George is like he's so agonized by writing, like it's such a pain to him that I think he just like surrenders at the end. He's like, "Oh, let's go make a movie," and it's time to go. So.
Good news without bad news. Is that next?
Yeah. And I don't really have any specific things I broke down or anything, but we talk about the good news, bad news technique so often. So the good news, bad news technique being that in action sequences, you want to have a series of ups and downs. You want to have something good happen, but then something bad happens, maybe as the cause of the good thing. It's reversal. And then more good news happens, then bad news, and then good news and bad news. It's this chain of events, as opposed to this movie does, in my opinion, the thing I hate most when I see things, like the thing I'm constantly like circling and saying, okay, you haven't done the work yet because your action scenes are one-dimensional and they're just done. This scene does that a lot, which is kind of surprising, but a lot early in the script. And then the big set pieces, it does much better. Like in the podcast, in the final duel, it's much better. But if you look at the action sequences in the beginning of this, so first of all, so they're sitting in the boardroom. They put the poison in. Now, first of all, there's one thing of easily overcoming obstacles. That's a technique of good news. They hold their breath. I mean, it's kind of hilarious because you get this quick half a second thing of them going and like puffing their cheeks. And it's literally like that's all it takes to overcome the poison gas. It's like
why even have the gas in there?
Yeah. And I know why they had the gas in there, because they wanted that next shot where they come out of the smoke. That's why. That is why they did the gas thing, because that's a cool shot. The lightsabers in the smoke, and I'm sure that's why he did it.
They could have used the Force to create like a balloon around them that of like where it doesn't like touch.
Let's not even get into their use of the Force.
Yeah,
I can't.
So then the robots come, and again, this could be a good news, bad news. You could say the bad news was the smoke or the gas. The good news was they hold their breath and survived it, which I hate as a thing. But anyway, so then the bad news is, now the bad guys are there. But this is where this movie, to me, it's like the bad guys are there. What do? They just slice right through all of them. Like, it's not a problem at all. Yeah, it's like no problem at all. And the one place we saw this work, and I think this is what probably George was thinking at the time in some ways, was John Wick. John Wick can kind of get away with this because he's so creative about blowing people away. That's still kind of fun to watch, even though he has no trouble mowing down like 20 people or something like that sometimes. Right. And I think that's what he was kind of going for with these characters. But there's so many scenes where bad guys show up, chop, chop, chop. Bad guys show up, chop, chop, chop. Like there's nothing even interesting or clever about it. Maybe they wave their hand.
Also, the droids just don't pose a threat.
They didn't pose a threat at all.
Yeah.
And particularly to what I was talking about before, with the scene where they rescue her from the droids is like, that's a scene where you could have had max drama. Another one. They just decimate them.
Yeah,
like it's nothing.
It's It's like we don't have time. Just wave your hand and we'll put it in post or something, whatever. So this movie is constantly like there'll be an action scene, but it's just so easy for them to get out of that it really kind of destroys some of the fun of it, some of the swashbuckling adventure or whatever there is, because they're just so overwhelming to all their opponents until maybe like the quick Darth Maul scene, or like I said, the pod race scene. I keep wanting to say podcast. And then
we
and then
have
the end.
both said that.
Yeah,
multiple
done it.
times.
I keep wanting to get that.
Because we're old.
Scene. Yeah.
The pod race is a fairly good news, bad news.
And there's good news, bad
Absolutely.
news a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
That's why it's entertaining.
It is.
Yeah.
It could
and
be
that's why
even
it's so good.
better, but it's entertaining. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, that's why it is so good, and that's why like the duel is so good in the end. But anyway, it's just this is a good movie. Like if you watch the first 50 minutes and you'll see not so great good news, bad news, and then the back 50 minutes maybe it has better good news, bad news, starting with the pod race and on.
I think what Jimmy said about changing Darth Maul in for everything changes everything you're saying, because he's so formidable. It has to be good news, bad news.
They would not be all good news.
They can't just slice through them like cheese. It's just like
I mean, imagine if they were on the defense this whole movie. Like,
it'd be way more exciting.
Yeah, like,
as
and
an
they
audience,
had it right there.
As an audience member, you're not worried about Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan against any droids at all. You're just not.
Never.
No, if one of
I couldn't put my finger on Jamie, and then when you said what was off about the first part, and then when you said this, was like, yes, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's the John Wickus.
Also, like
approach.
when they're fighting Darth Maul versus when they're fighting a droid, they have drama armor against a droid. A droid's not going to kill Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Or Qui-Gon ever. That's never happening, right? Like, you're not gonna let that happen. But Darth Maul can take one of them out, right?
Yeah, totally. You absolutely buy that the second he comes on screen.
Right. He's feasibly gonna kill somebody. Yeah. Why does Act 3 work? I think that's a perfect segue to why Act 3 does work.
I put this on here because we all like the third act. So
if it wasn't for the third act, it would be a lost cause.
Why do we like the third act? Who wants to start?
I'm gonna start by saying that while I don't love the Jake Lloyd cut back and forth cutting, at least that's the most exciting the movie is as far as pacing and cutting. That's like the most dynamic the movie gets. It goes back and forth between the lightsaber duel and the space battle. I don't like the space battle very much, but at least there's some life there to the actual execution of the movie. It's almost like he became a filmmaker in those last couple of minutes. You know what I mean?
Recaptured that.
Yeah, he recaptured that because the rest of the movie is so stilted and so straightforward. This, like nothing is, there's no dynamicism to anything. Even the pod race is like whole movie stops. It's just the fucking race. Yeah. There is nothing happening else but this. But at least in the last third act, they try to have this. Here's, this is happening and this is happening. Everyone's doing their part, So that's one of the reasons I think it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he's doing something he did in Star Wars Return of the Jedi, to a lesser extent in Empire, though he did have two, I think, parallel stories running in the end with the duel and them escaping. He likes doing this. This is kind of his Star Wars thing, right? Is the three stories all running parallel or whatever, and they're all kind of having the beats almost at the same time, like the ups and downs. I guess I said Star Wars, but he didn't really do it with Star Wars. It's just a trench sequence. It's more Jedi and Empire. Mm-hmm. So he kind of is doing that thing again, and that gives it momentum. That kind of isn't, if Lucas was like an editing guy, he kind of deems himself. I know his wife edited a lot of the stuff with him, but he likes that editing pace, and I think that's a large part. I think the duel, honestly, I remember the duel. I don't remember much of the other ins and outs. I kind of remember the Anakin thing is nonsense, and some of the other stuff is getting in the way of the duel. I think
there's good news and bad news in the Anakin thing.
Yeah,
there is. Absolutely. Yeah. It's well crafted. It's kind of goofy and silly. And
it's not great.
he's accidentally kind of taken in, and now he's got to save the day. It feels like Star Tours a little bit, like in Disney World or something. But the duel is just really, really good. Like I mean,
It is.
it's just well executed.
The
And I think-
whiteboard of the duel with the force fields is so good. It
Mhm,
almost I think back in the day, it saved everyone for like a week after seeing it. You're like, you
yeah.
didn't want to think about all the shit that you didn't like, because that end
Yeah.
when they're just sitting there staring at each other,
Yeah.
waiting to fight again, like
Yep.
the movie becomes fucking cool, to use my
It
word again.
delivered.
The
It was
characters,
cool
those
right there.
those characters suddenly become cool.
The coolest, the coolest dudes in the universe, man.
And the music's awesome, and it's just
It's
really
John Williams'
really
best score, honestly.
so
Like his
from
best Star Wars score.
two story things I will say about it though. One story thing is that it's very clear goal wise. You know what I mean? Like I know the goals of everybody at that point, so all the politics stuff is gone. And I know it's not like one of the cutaways is Palpatine winning an election or something. So that part's pretty clear. But this is a weird, I wouldn't say a hot take, but this is a weird take that I will say. For years, I tried to replicate this screenwriting wise in script now and then. And I will say the 3-track parallel thing, while I love it in movies, it's kind of boring to read in the page. It's hard to execute on the page. Like, whether or not you should think in those terms as a writer, it's up to you. I do tend to think in those terms. Because more of my movies. Yeah.
I was gonna say I would do it with editing.
Yeah. I've written so many scripts that more of my scripts have been read than seen. So I tend to worry more about how they read than how they actually shoot. I'm like, shooting is a later day thing that I'll worry about after I make a lot of money and they start paying me to rewrite it. That's when I'll start worrying about shooting. But a lot of times when I write it, I do really worry about like how the reader is going to experience this. Is it going to be as fun? And I will say that if you start cutting away to a lot of things back and forth for like 30, 40 pages, there's something about it that kills the mo. And honestly, this is not like some kind of screenwriting rule or anything. This is just this is my opinion. Like when I've read and written things, that it just can kind of kill things a little bit. The good news is if you're already to the final pages of your script, most readers will be all in or all out at that point. So usually they'll either be big fans or they'll be like, oh, I just wish the script would end. Why are they giving me 3 different stories? Just finish, just get done.
I think what to your point as a person who reads all day, it's this thing where visually you don't need to orient the audience about what they're seeing.
Yeah. It's so quick.
So when it's on the page, every one of those intercuts,
you got to remind them.
You have to visually reorient. You have to reorient the reader as to the update of what's happening with all. And if you start doing that with 3 locations and 3 scenarios and 3 sets of characters against 3 sets of oppositions, you really start bogging down the reader with all of this information that we just have to keep reminding, just due to the nature of how it reads. Whereas in a novel, you can space that out. And,
you'll do different chapters and things like that.
But on the script page,
and when you watch it in a movie, it's instantaneous and it works every time. Mm-hmm. It's just in reading, you're shifting gears, you're reading extra words, it's actually slower, not faster. Where in a movie, it's faster, not slower. It's a weird.
it's very weird.
If I was doing that like for my own thing, I'd write it out so it does the cut back and forth, and then I'd write the version for me when I'm shooting it, where it's just the solid. Like I would just write the Anakin thing. Right. But I want to make sure that I have the cuts for later. You know what I mean? Right. So then I shoot it like that, and then I would just, in editing, go back to the original version. But I think I'd have to. I don't. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like I want to see it as one giant chunk. And do it in post. Not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love your editing side. Your editing perspective is always like, the editing is the strength of this portion for sure.
Even if I don't like one of the halves, it feels like a lot is going on. It feels like there's like momentum,
Yeah. What I thought was what stood out for me as the bookend to the front part of this, with with the weak crawl and the confusing story DNA of who's the protagonist and everything. I feel like like Jamie said it already, it was like it like all of a sudden gets its shit together, and it is, we are locked in for the third act, has like story DNA. These are the bad guys, these are the good guys. This is a situation we're actually seeing the Gungans suffer, so we feel the stakes. Everything is functioning like a Hollywood cheeseburger. Finally, the
Jar
first two
Jar's even
acts
paying off.
Jar Jar's paying off.
Yeah.
Everything is finally there's a clear goal, stakes, reward, obstacles, and urgency. They're gonna go to that ship and they're gonna knock out the communications to shut down the droid army. It's very easy to understand. And then there's Darth Maul, who's a bad guy. They just got to fight him. It's a battle to the death. It's very easy to connect with and understand. Whereas the first two, so that gives it all momentum. Whereas the first two acts, it's all meandering and confusing. So, but yeah, I think it's instructive.
Honestly, I mean, this would be a little bit more of a deft hand, but you could have had the third act be like a 3-parter where you're also showing the Senate taking their final votes.
Yeah,
and I could see like the cameras like closing in on Darth Sidious or Palpatine's face as he like starts to smile and raise up his hands, and it all ends in a crescendo like that. You know what I mean? Like, not only has the good triumph, but the evil ultimately is beyond, way worse. Something way worse
that's
happened.
the way that you could help us understand that he got his way.
That him getting that thing is the worst thing that could have happened, and more to come. But that's not what this movie is. So yeah. That is all of our talking points for
a hell of a lot.
It's a hell of a lot. And I mean, this is a movie I think we could easily go another hour if we wanted. We're not going to. But is there anything left you guys want to say about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace? Menaki?
Not on this movie, but I did want to encourage the questions again. If you have questions about this episode or another episode, we're building the list. We're only like 2 or 3 questions away from having enough to do a full episode.
All right,
answer story questions. Yes,
so send in your questions.
Writers Blockbusters Podcast at gmail.com. Send us your questions.
Cool. Jamie, anything?
No. So Black Velvet Fairies, the podcast I worked on, that's still going on. It's like episode 7 now. So you have 7 episodes. If you haven't started to listen, just go look for Black Velvet Fairies. It's kind of supernatural thriller, makers of the Blair Witch Project are involved, and you'll hear Bob's voice in the first episode.
Yeah. I don't have anything, so I think we're good.
I just want to say I had a blast.
Yeah, look, no matter what I do, for some, maybe it's nostalgia, but this movie does. I don't know why I like this movie. It's my
I love the movie.
It's my favorite of the prequels too, and I think it's the most hated, right? I think maybe people have come around to episode 2 being worse. Episode 2 I think is the worst one.
It's bad.
It's pretty bad.
Well,
yeah.
You know what I think it is too? I think anytime, like, that, one of my kind of critiques of movies, my first critique is that somebody's passion project? And even if it's bad, if it's somebody's passion project, I kind of enjoy it for whatever reason that is.
Absolutely same.
Yeah, this is definitely George's passion project. And then I think after he got all the backlash, I think he kind of lost his passion a little bit for the next 2. Like, I think he put a lot into this one. And then the next 2, he did fine and he ran out the string. But this is kind of me making stuff up, but I do feel like this is the one with is full on, like, I'm back, baby. I'm going to do it all. Yeah. I'm going to do it my way. We're going to use my own cameras, and I'm going to do the editing and the directing and the this and the that. And we're going to do it all. Yeah.
This is his legend, his Ridley Scott legend, like this is the thing he was always dreaming about. And then everyone was like, it sucks. Like, yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
Eat poodoo, right?
Yep. It's for kids.
Yeah.
For kids, dummy.
All right. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.